Can I just say that if anybody heard a hip hip hooray just as I was coming through the door, it was completely coincidental. Something else happening outside. Thank you, and welcome now to the full council meeting today. Members are welcome. To those of you who are in the public gallery, to those, if there's any still in the conference hall, and of course to those watching the meeting on YouTube. You're all welcome. For those of you in the building, I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedure. If there is an emergency, please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and congregate by the cathedral. As with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance and respect. Item 2, apologies for absence. I have received apologies from Councillors Bennett, Kent, Dyer, Fitzjohn, Edwards, Stafford Townsend, Grant, Parsons and Bartle. Are there any other apologies? Oh, you are here. Absolutely. Thank you. A stoic. Yes. I think everybody's been taken out by the cold that you might hear that I have as well. So apologies for that.
Chair. Sorry,
Chair.
I think Councillor Craig's not here for this session,
that's
although
correct.
she was here earlier.
Yeah. Councillor Craig has sent her apologies for this meeting. Do we have any declarations of interest? No? Nothing that I can see. Thank you. Moving to agenda item 4, minutes of the previous meetings. This is a little bit unusual because we have 2 sets of minutes before us today. At the November full council meeting, the October minutes were not approved as a member requested amendments. I can now confirm that no amendments were made to the October minutes. So, I move that the minutes of the previous meetings of full council, held both on the 18th of October 2022 and on the 8th of November 2022, be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
My Lord Mayor.
Do I have a seconder?
Sorry, my Lord Mayor.
Yes.
I've got a comment on the minutes of the meeting, and I'm just double checking the header of the meeting from 18th of October. It says that there was no debate on the medium-term financial plan and capital strategy paper, but there was a debate on that.
So this is on the minutes of the 18th of October that have already come and gone and back again, and now you've got amendments.
Apologies.
Can you follow that, Tim? So I swear when other people were Lord Mayor, there were never all these problems with the minutes, and now we've got minutes that have been twice here, and they're still finding problems with them. So, have you got the point? Okay, a minor amendment, we're going to delete those words. Are you happy?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, we come back to Councillor Hans. Do we have a seconder?
I think you do, yes.
Thank
Seconded.
You. Okay. Can I take it that the minutes are then agreed? Thank you. Moving on to Lord Mayor's business. Council notes the sad news that the former Liberal Democrat councillor Alf Hathcock and former Liberal Democrat and Conservative councillor Tony Carey have recently passed away. Council also notes the passing of George Johnny Johnson, who was the last surviving dam buster. Johnny was awarded the Distinguished Flying Medal for his part in the mission during the Second World War, and after a long-running campaign in which Bristol played an active part, he was later appointed an MBE by Her late Majesty the Queen in 2017. A resident of Westbury-on-Trim, he also received the Lord Mayor's Medal in 2015. I ask members of Council to now join me in a minute's silence to mark our respect. I would also, I'm just not quite sure, it's a slight change of this. I think we'll ask, should we have the speeches first and then the minute's silence? I think we'll have the speeches first and then the minute's silence. So we did decide sort of laterally that people would wanted to speak to these silences and to remember the passing of these people. So can I first ask Councillor Clark to make her comments, please?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Squadron Leader George Leonard Johnson, MBE DFM, born 25th of November 1921 and died the 7th of December 2022, better known as Johnny Johnson, was in the British Air Force. He was a British Air Force officer who was the last surviving member of Squadron 617 RAF, and he took part in Operation Chastise, which was the Dam Busters raid in 1943. His passing is very much the end of an era. I had the great privilege to have met him, and I do consider that to be a great privilege. I'd now like to move on to Alf Havoc, who served from 2006 to 2014 as a Liberal Democrat councillor for Windmill Hill Ward. Alf was a very popular member of the group and a diligent ward councillor, having represented the area with former councillor Mark Bailey. He was a great asset as he had great knowledge around housing, as he had worked as a housing officer for Bristol City Council. He was also a popular councillor with all parties. Locally, he will be probably best remembered as a long-standing member of the Victoria Park Action Group. Finally, I would like to come on to Tony Carey, former councillor for Brislington East, serving from 1992 to 1995, then returning in 2016 to 2021. When I put out a message to fellow councillors and on Facebook, the universal comments that came back were that Tony was a great fellow and very embedded in his beloved Brislington. Locally, Tony, his twin, and his brother were known as the Carey Boys. And Tony's sense of fun and mischief stems from his early days in the choir and the Scout movement in Brislington. He was involved in lots of groups locally, notably Friends of Brislington Brook, where he was the first chair. We will all remember Tony. At any event, Tony would get his guitar out and at the drop of the hat, sing a song. All three people will be very missed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'd now like to call on Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. You have 1 minute, a generous minute.
Lord Mayor, I would like to endorse all Councillor Clark said about Johnny Johnston. He represents one of a dying breed, and we sadly probably won't see his like again. Clearly, those people, particularly the war generation who made the sacrifices and showed the bravery they did, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to, and we send our feelings and our condolences to his family and friends, of course. Turning to our colleagues who recently died, members of this chamber tend to divide between those of us who relish the cut and thrust of political debate and those who are more devoted to representing their constituents, though of course you can be both, of course. Tony and I both fell into the second camp, without doubt. I had the privilege of knowing Tony for over a third of a century. He was elected for Bres when I was for Bishopsworth in '92, and he was always fun-loving, passionate and devoted to Brislington West, of course. So it was no surprise to me when he was re-elected 20 years later, initially for us, then for the Lib Dems. I have to say, I'm sure the experience of the Lib Dems was similar to us. Tony was always keen to volunteer to make a speech in the chamber. When he did, invariably he changed the decades of group policy and turned it on its head. It wasn't very good for the blood pressure of the officers of the group, but he was certainly genuine and he represented his people. I knew for about half that time He was passionate, as Jos has said, for Widmerhill, and really fought for that area for the 8 years he was on council. He was quite unassuming but really devoted. I know he was a former housing officer, and people in Bishopsworth, the Order,
Councillor Eddy, I'm going to have to ask you
remember him to this day. One final anecdote, because it says something, Lord Mayor, if you mind. Alderman John Keeley told me he was his election director in 2006, and Alf had been unwell since his 20s, and in fact during the election he was forced to go into hospital. John says afterwards, he said, if you'd stayed there for a few more weeks, you would have had an even bigger majority. We give our thoughts and prayers to their families and friends.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. I have to say there's nothing conservative about your estimation of what a minute is. OK, now can I call on Councillor Steve Pearce, please, to speak for approximately a minute?
Yes, just a minute. George Johnny Johnson, DFMO MBE. Books have been written and films have been made about the exploits of 617 Dam Busters. Johnny served His late Majesty King George VI, Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and he was a teacher and he was active in local politics, though Conservative colleagues may know more about that than I would. What may be less well known is that Alf and Tony also both served Her late Majesty and obviously gave much for their local communities. So we thank all three for their services to the Crown and to their communities.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Now I would like to invite Councillor Feehans to rise to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
I just want to say very few words about both Alf and Tony Carey. Back in the day, the more long-memoried of you might remember, I was once a Lib Dem too. I was young, I needed the money, what can I say, Stephen? And Alf was very much a sort of kindly uncle in the background. Whilst he was in hospital, I was actually pregnant, marching the streets of trying to get myself elected. But I think what you can say about both Tony and Alf is it's always sad to hear the passing of former colleagues, but they were both real gentlemen. And my impression of them was that they, a bit like what Richard was saying, they regarded all the sort of fury and the cut and thrust of debate with a degree of confusion and a degree of bewilderment. And I never really saw either of them get het up or angry or certainly never raise their voice in any circumstances. They were really lovely men to work with. They're both real gentlemen. And I think the city will miss them and we will too. So thank you to both of those. Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to call on Councillor Hopkins to speak for the Knoll Community Party.
Hi. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Like Fee, I was a member of the Lib Dem group, in fact, group leader for a while, and basically, and knew both Alf and Tony very well indeed. Interesting that neither of them would be regarded as party political, as it were. They were both fixed on looking after their community. And in actual fact, the partnership between Alf and Mark Bailey was quite a remarkable one. They were effectively, as far as the public were concerned in that area, the Mark and Alf party. Nobody would have thought any worse of them on any of the things that they did. They knew that they were interested purely in looking after their patch and the people who lived in it, which is what they did. Tony Carey was slightly different. Great sense of humour, a great history when he started speaking to him, what the things he'd done over the years, which were quite fascinating. And he was quite happy working with the Conservative group in this chamber. Had nothing to say against them. But when Boris Johnson took over leadership of the Tory party, that was it. He had to go. He said, I can't stand doing this. And he didn't say a word against any of the people here that he worked with, but he couldn't stay in a party that had Boris Johnson as leader. So although he was a gentle chap, he had his standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Thank you all for those fond memories, and I would now invite all members of the chamber to stand and join me in a minute's silence in remembrance. Thank you. Thank you all. We now move on to the public forum. 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, and it is split into two sections, 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on our website. I will go through the list, calling on those who have indicated that they planned to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and start to wrap up when the lights turn amber. There were no public forum petitions received for this meeting. There were, however, a total of 19 public statements received. A list will be displayed on the screen. 9 members of the public indicated that they planned to attend and speak to their statements, and they will be displayed on the screen, and we will run through those statements in order. I invite each person to speak for 1 minute. So please summarise your statement, bearing in mind that everybody will have read your statements already. They've been published and read by all members of the council. The Mayor and the public will have read them as well. Can I also just add that I'm very pleased to see people here in the public forum gallery today. It's great to see you here, and I hope that you enjoy listening to the statements and questions. There is actually a natural break in the meeting today at about 3:45. So if you want to stay and listen until then, we would appreciate that. If you feel that you want to go before then, if you could please do so fairly quietly so that other people who are still making their statements and asking their questions can be heard undisturbed, I would be grateful for that. Thank you. So the first person we have is, do I have Alderman Nagus? Can we get a microphone to Alderman Nagus? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, bus services in Bristol are catastrophic. You should know that there is the ability to change this under the 2017 Act, which means that the previous deregulated system whereby the private bus services could not speak effectively to local authorities can be reversed, and a lot of progressive local authorities are doing just this. I'm asking that you consider the options you've got in front of you to put this point to the Metro Mayor, who has the ability under the Act and his transport responsibilities to progress alternatives to the present system. Even if we had enough bus drivers, we would still have a system which was a mismatch, which did not work. So I urge you to put this point and the opportunity you have later on this afternoon, to get this point to the Metro Mayor And please remember what the public and, frankly, your constituents will want of you to make a better public bus service in Bristol. And I leave it to you, but they're screaming out for this. Please take action today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Negus. We are actually going to change the order of the statements and jump down to Public Statement 16, because this is from Dr. Tim Godfrey and Joe Hughes. And you'll see that these are two in uniform there, and obviously we would like them to be able to get back out and get back on duty. So I'm sure you all appreciate that we're quite happy to bump them up first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Tim Godfrey, Emergency Medicine Consultant at Southmead, Deputy Director, Acute Care, South Western Ambulance Service and Critical Care Doctor with Great Western Air Ambulance Charity. And I would thank you for this minute to speak to you, where minutes matter in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. The minutes that you don't receive good quality CPR from the people near you when you've collapsed, and the minutes that pass when you haven't got a public accessible defibrillator brought to you lead to worsening outcomes. In Great Britain, we have an 8% out-of-hospital cardiac arrest survival rate. In Norway, that's 25%. It's 20% in Holland. To capture the picture locally, we attended 2,000 incidents in 2021 as Great Western Air Ambulance Charity. A quarter of those were cardiac arrests, 161 in the city of Bristol. GWAC are working with our friends and colleagues in the Sam Polledri Foundation to bring more AEDs forward. We're working on 36 at the moment, but we desperately need your support. Dee and I are on shift, as you know. Tonight there is a 90% chance that I will tell someone that their loved one has died as a result of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and only you can help. You and the public. Thank you.
Thank you for being here today, and thank you for that, absolutely sort of powerful message to all of us. We go back to the top now, and we have a statement from Hayden Gill, which is Leadership for Cycling. Is Hayden here? Like your jumper.
Okay. Thank you to the opposition councillors for supporting the petition last month for safer cycling and walking in Bristol. Clearly, I wasn't convinced by the Mayor's blog response, and that's why I'm here on my lunch break. Apologies to Councillor Beach if you're there, but I will be leaving to go back to work, so apologies. We all know that cycling and walking is the best way to travel. There's benefits for society, benefits for those travelling, and for the benefit of Councillor Alexander, less impact on the road surface, leading to fewer potholes for councillors to take selfies with. We all, failing to enable walking and cycling will leave Bristol noisy, polluted, potholed, poor and unhealthy. I'll end with some poetry, if I may. There once was a mayor of Bristol. He went on and on about Metro, but he failed to see a missed opportunity to make Bristol safer to cycle. Thank you.
Second statement is from Rob Breyer, suspend the deregulated bus market. Do we have Rob Breyer? Thank you.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So I'm here just to amplify the open letter, which exactly 1,600 people have now signed across the region. This was set up to call for bus franchising in the region by WestAct, which stands for West of England Shared Transport and Active Traveller Group, lobbying for this. We all know and understand the detrimental impact that First's bus cuts are having on communities, particularly those without other methods of transport they can use. So we need more control over this. The Mayor of Bristol was on record in favour of publicly run buses, I think, and the statement is really just a reminder that Bristol's residents want a publicly run, accountable bus service that delivers affordable, reliable and efficient bus services across the region. We're also, WestAct, going to be in various forms at South Gloucestershire Council's full council meeting tomorrow, and will no doubt in the new year be at the other two councils, Bath and North East Somerset and North Somerset, just a call for greater action on this and to make the case to all mayors and council leaders for bus franchising. So please, everyone here, including the Mayor and Cabinet members, whoever needs to make more of a shout about this, do everything you can to convince Dan Norris to suspend the deregulated broken bus market and provide a franchised bus service under contract through the West of England Combined Authority. Thank you.
Do we have Louise Pelledri? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Lord Mayor and councillors. I am Louise Pelledri. AEDs can be the difference between life and death. I know this because my beautiful 24-year-old son suddenly and tragically dropped dead of a cardiac arrest in Millennium Square, February this year. If the AED, the Sam Pelledri Foundation, have since installed into Millennium Square, which has already been called upon 6 times, was there at the time, or any of the 5 AEDs that were surrounding Sam were registered and available to the public, my son would have stood a 7 out of 10 chance for survival, not the 1 in 10 chance he got. He would still be alive and able to fulfill his many dreams he had. And we would not be in this living hell we find ourselves in. Sam was so happy and so full of life, such a beautiful person inside and out, always looking out for others. So if we together can achieve making Bristol a safer place to live and save others from this devastation in Sam's name, he would want us to do this. And his avoidable death would not have been in vain. It's too late for my beautiful boy and for countless others, but not for someone else's child or loved one. I now know the only thing that would have saved my son was an AED. We have the technology. Why are we not using it? Why are we not trying to save these countless avoidable deaths? Sam didn't have the chance of surviving, but others can. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Louise. I'm very sorry for your loss. The next statement is Simon Brooks.
Working, okay. Okay, I was a community first responder for 9 years and I've been to cardiac arrests. Life expectancy drops by 10% per minute without bystander CPR, and you need a defibrillator within the first 3 to 5 minutes. I've installed 25 public access defibs in Bristol so far over the past 3 years, but this is just a drop in the ocean. We need a proper CPR, DP, as you were, we need a proper defibrillator network. If taxi drivers had CPR knowledge, it would be beneficial for the city and community relations. We've currently taught 3 groups so far. Could I please ask you to promote the general public learning CPR and extend the current school children training done by Heart Starters? Could you support a campaign for a network of defibrillators and consider making CPR a condition of taxi drivers' license? Thank you.
Thank you. Next statement is Liv Fortune, Bristol Central Library.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am absolutely horrified that we're here yet again with your arbitrary threats to relocate Central Library, which, by the way, was gifted to the people of Bristol, so it isn't yours to lease or sell. This, in my opinion, has absolutely nothing to do with trying to save money. It's a blatant winding down of the library system in Bristol. It's blatant asset stripping. No doubt the Cathedral School want to get their hands on the rest of that library building for next to nothing. Central government at the moment is in disarray. Their austerity policies have no mandate. So I call upon you to at least wait for a general election before doing anything which could have a lasting and damaging effect on the people of Bristol for years to come. Thank you, and get your hands off our assets. Asset strippers, ego trippers, down at City Hall, fleecing us all.
Thank you. We have Sean Ellis-Thomas.
Hello, you might recognise me from the Residents Against the Mask campaign earlier this year. I'm now the chair of the Friends of Redcatch Park. There is a man in Knowle West called Mike Alden. Despite being registered disabled and unable to get around without a mobility scooter, he has been running a football club in the Park Centre Knoll and in Redcatch Park for over 10 years. There are now 12 teams, including 5 disability teams. He does this as a volunteer, completely unpaid. We have nominated him for the BBC Sports Personality of the Year Unsung Hero Award, and he has made it to the national shortlist and will be featured on the live TV show on the 21st of December. The club desperately need better facilities in Redcatch Park to accommodate the disability and girls' teams. A CAT transfer has been requested for the pavilion so that this can be updated, but this application has hit a wall. Bristol is about to be put on the national map because of Mike's achievements. It would seem appropriate to reward his efforts by expediting the CAT transfer so he can continue to do this amazing work for our community. Thank you.
Do we have Louise Somerville?
Thank you. I'm here speaking on behalf of a grassroots women's group, Women's Voices Matter. I'm here to talk about the Silver Motion and the subsequent trans-inclusion policies that the Council are proceeding with. This motion was passed without an equality impact assessment. We believe that this breaches the Council's lawful responsibility to adhere to the public sector equality duty, and without consideration of the potential illegality of your statement, which was essentially political, which is at odds with the 2010 Equality Act. There are no definitions in your motion or your policies for sex, gender, trans, non-binary, or genderqueer. So all of these words are open to interpretation. Sex is the only legally defined term in the motion and the subsequent proposed policies. My group are concerned that the policies are have the potential to waste money on unnecessary
Can I just
legal
remind you that
action.
everybody will have read your statements and we'd need you just to speak for a minute? So, okay, thank you. That is actually the first 15 minutes have gone, thank you. So we will now move to public questions received. The questions received have been published on the website and are shared on the screen now. 28 questions have been received from 25 members of the public, and 6 of those have indicated that they have wished to attend. It's 15 minutes for each. There's quite a few more statements. It's 15 minutes for each. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible in the 15 minutes available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. When I call on you, please read your question out, and then we will try to show the question on the screen, and then the Mayor will reply verbally. Following the response from the Mayor, you will be invited to ask one supplementary question. So, first of all, do we have John Broomhead? John Broomhead, thank you. Please ask your question. So, if you can repeat your question, please.
Retail space. We put in an offer on the November 21. A commercial landlord, we would have had a store open by now. We finally, with the council, who are the landlord, agreed heads of terms by June. Then asbestos was found. The council received a quote for £30,000 to remove it. This was too much for them. They then said they needed to get 2 more quotes. In the last 3 months, we haven't heard anything. We've made numerous requests, and I guess we got to a point where we didn't know where to go with it. Surely, we're trying to pay the council £30,000 to make a derelict store look really good and to provide commercial money coming in. this was my last plea, I guess, to find out where to go with this.
Can we let the Mayor answer the question now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it got to my office. We've had a look at it. We think the delay is unacceptable. My office are chasing it up, and we'll get back to you by the end of the week.
Do you have a supplementary question?
I had a second question which is separate, which I put forward as well.
Well, I think the supplementary question has to come out of this question, really. And I think you've got the answer.
Well, I had a completely separate point, which I sent through as a completely separate question. So my second question was around planning.
Okay, you do have a second question. Sorry. Ask your second question.
Thank you. So my second question is that we're trying to open a new store at the top of White Ladies Road. We've agreed a lease with the landlord. We're trying to put in a new shop front, and we put in planning application for in August. We've tried 3 or 4 times to communicate with the department. We have had nothing through whatsoever other than saying that there is a delay in a planning officer being allocated our position. As of the 9th of January, we're legally bound to have this store, and it will cost us over £5,000 a month, and we have no income coming in because we can't open a shop if we don't put in a new shop front. My question, I guess, is first, why is there this delay? Are you prepared for an important local charity to have to pay £5,000 in excess of that with no income coming in? Very interestingly, again, we tried to communicate with the council on this. We had no response, and I just looked at my phone before this, and at 1:59, I had an email saying we've just been allocated a planning officer. Interesting coincidence, maybe, but I'd like to understand why there is this delay and how I can speed this up.
I think you have asked the question. If we let the Mayor answer.
Well, there's no coincidence. It's because we found out about it in my office and made it happen. I would say I don't know. It would be interesting to know what channels of communication failed on the council's part, so we can have a look at how the organisation responds to people in the city. But I would say, it's not just as a private citizen, but as a representative of a major national charity, that you just approach my office directly in the future if you're having issues like this, and we can explore. I will take the opportunity just to point to something that your situation will throw some light on, and it's one we make often, in that 12 years of substandard financing of local government, which is something we're all facing across the country right now, is often talked about in terms of the loss of frontline services, parks, libraries, public toilets. But the hidden casualty of the financial challenges we faced are often those backroom office roles. No one protests for planners, lawyers, accountants, and yet actually what you'll share through the Local Government Association as well, we've experienced across the country, is that backroom capacity of local authorities to keep the cogs of the city lubricated has been severely undermined. And we're going to find out exactly what happened in your situation, but our backroom teams are stretched beyond all that's reasonable to try and respond to the public in many situations. So that's just one of the challenges that we've taken on. But as I said, there's no coincidence. It's once it got to the right people, we're able to reach out to the team and make sure the appropriate response was given.
Thank you. Can we move on now to a question from Liv Fortune about the Central Library?
Yeah, so as you can see on the board, it's there. I just wondered whether Central Library is connected to any of these underground heat networks I've heard so much about.
So, is it connected to the...
Sorry, can I just clarify? Is it connected to the heat networks?
Could it be?
Oh, yeah, it's that would be the plan. That and it was set out in the in the report that went with City Leap. So it would be part of the future connection plans.
Right. Okay. My second question, I've asked this before and I've not received a response, which is why I've actually come here on my lunch break today to ask in person so I can get an answer. Have you actually invited the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer to come here and explain to him the financial challenges that you talked to us about? Have you actually done that personally?
That's not really the way British politics works. You don't kind of just... Well, I'm just saying, it's not really the way British politics works. That'd be like saying if I tried to build a rocket to go to the moon. We can make the effort, but it won't have... That's not the way the Prime Minister and the Chancellor respond. They don't just turn up at local government to have that, conversation. But we have made numerous representations to national government through the LGA. We've just written 2 letters to Michael Gove. We've written to the Secretary, to the Chancellor about this. And I met the Prime Minister myself just a few weeks ago at the pre-COP event at Buckingham Palace. Secondly, in terms of explaining what's going on with local government, the government know what's going on with local government. Only a couple of weeks ago on the news, the leaders of Kent and Hampshire, Conservative-led leaders of local authorities, were talking about the potential for their authorities going bankrupt, essentially. So it's bringing them here to explain the situation is not really a good use of time because they are aware. What we need to do is work with our networks of local government representatives, continue to make the case for adequate investment in local government.
Supplementary question is, surely you realise that change only happens through revolutionary things. You said that British politics doesn't work this way. You could be the groundbreaker. You could do something different and see if it works. You've got nothing to lose. Inviting them here, and obviously I'm being quite literal, of course they know, but it's a political choice. Austerity is a political choice. The deaths from austerity and the cuts are a political choice. You can make that clear to them. Because I don't think although they know, they don't realise, they're out of touch and they don't care. You can change that by being a revolutionary. Thank you.
Okay. I think the Mayor feels that he's answered the question before already. I mean, you're reiterating the question second. Well, let's not have the public gallery disintegrate into people talking to each other. That's not going to help us today, I'm afraid, unfortunately. I think if we move on to Nigel Shipley. Do we have Nigel? No, can't see Nigel Shipley. Do we have Hayden still here with his jumper? I recognise Hayden.
Thank you. So first question is, will the Bristol Mayor follow the Mayor of London in introducing a direct vision standard for lorries entering Bristol?
So we find it, just check, Hayden, because I didn't quite hear your question there. It's about the lorry direct vision standard, is that right? Where is he? Okay. It's an interesting approach. We've got our officers having a look at this now, and I've asked them to come back to me in January with an assessment of one is, I think, the risks of vehicles being displaced from London to areas without the intervention, but also how they think it will fit within our safety. And in the meantime, we're reaching out to Sadiq's office, so we want to know a couple of things. In particular, one is what powers did he use? Because obviously he's a different kind of mayor to myself, so he'll have access to different powers. And also, how did they define the vehicles? Like, how did they go about administering the scheme? So hopefully we'll have a fuller picture, of this in January.
Brilliant. Thank you. Supplementary to that one, I guess, is will this report be made public?
We'll be happy to share it. If you want to reach out, we'd be happy to communicate with you directly about it as well.
My second question, apart from Brockway, Ogdenville, and North Haverbrook in the US, can the Mayor name a city with a successful underground bus system?
Yeah, well, Brockway, Ogdenville, whatever it is, and Northbrook, Haverbrook have an overground monorail system. But if I can flip on your question here, I will name a city that has a clogged up transport and inefficient transport offer because it doesn't have a mass transit system, and that city's Bristol. And so what we do need to do is think about how we're going to provide transport solutions, a way of moving hundreds of thousands of people around Bristol in a finite geographical area, 42 square miles, but of a population that's 472,000 today, that's going to be 550,000 by 2050. So putting in a transformed public transport offer for that population is going to be essential on all number of fronts. One is obviously making that more efficient, decarbonised, hopefully accessible, affordable, reliable and safe. But also by offering people underground alternatives as well, we can relieve the pressure that there is at the moment on people to travel overground. And having a reliable mass transit system is an essential part of seeing a chapter change in the way people can experience getting around Bristol. We need to move beyond the Band-Aid approach that we've had in the past, trying to make a broken system work in an old city. So I think it's essential.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we have time for one more question, and that's Rob Breyer. He's got a question on bus services.
So I won't read the whole question now, but basically, obviously, as the Mayor, you had a number of manifesto commitments. I'm just wondering how likely it is we are to see those commitments come to fruition, given the changed context? Because obviously, a lot's happened since your manifesto. Are you still planning to kind of, it's double the frequency and improve the reliability of existing bus journeys through the bus deal, increase the number of bus routes and protect existing community services? So is that still your plan?
Nice to see you in real life. But usually see you on the internet. That's Twitter and all that. But no, we clearly have those aspirations because that's what Bristol needs. But look, circumstances change. We've had a COVID, which has really impacted on the business of busing, and we have to, because of the pattern of ownership we have now, it is run as a business. Patronage is only back up to 70%. We were on a fantastic upward trajectory, but that has been impacted. We've got the impacts of Brexit on labour shortages. We've had this recent disastrous budget under the Truss era, as well, which has impacted us. So it's been some major challenges for us. But we want to look at the future models of how we run the bus services, which is what we called for in my last cabinet, and which we'll communicate with the Metro Mayor about and our neighbours about how we make sure that we have as good a future for our bus offering as Bristol as possible as part of a wider system change in public transport.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Oh, yeah, I suppose my supplementary question is, are you going to keep repeating this thing about you seeing me in real life? That's a bizarre thing to keep bringing up. Well, okay, thanks, Liv, but I'll ask the question. It's more about whether you see any of those things really happening if we don't franchise the buses. Do you think that that's the only option available to us?
So, well, first off, I think it's worth just showing that franchising is not a silver bullet. There's no substitute for money. And at some point, no matter what the model of ownership is, or whatever arrangements are around bus services, drivers need to be paid, they need to be recruited, buses need to have fuel put in them, tyres need to be replaced, there needs to be maintenance. So there is no substitute for money. But we do think that franchising is one of the tools that we could look at as part of a combined authority area, Greater Bristol area, and we've raised that with the Metro Mayor, and I talked about it in the last cabinet. But our position as a party is actually more radical than that, and we believe in public ownership, which is something we've also called for. The challenge is we need a national context in which public ownership is possible. But again, even public ownership without adequate finance would be a challenge. On all fronts, I'd say on the climate change front in general, it doesn't happen unless someone pays for it. So we need adequate investment in it. But nice to see you. I'll say it again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good, thanks. My final supplementary question, then, I suppose, is, well, my other question, have I done that yet?
I don't think you have
Anyway,
another question.
I've
No,
got
I don't
two
think you
questions
do.
on the...
Have you not had two supplementary questions?
I've had one supplementary question.
Well, we're running way over time. Okay, quickly.
Okay.
Thank you.
My supplementary question is to do with Dan Norris. You know, what is it going to take for him to commit to franchising? I agree with everything you said, by the way, Marvin. It's really great to hear you say it, and I think, and I've heard you say it before, so you know, it's good to see you repeat it. But what's it going to take for Dan Norris to support franchising? Because he hasn't so far. He's kind of said it's on the table. You've said it's on the table. When's it going to happen?
To be honest, there's an interesting theme here. You know that the Combined Authority has meetings, right? Yeah, and you know they're open to the public, right? I don't know how many statements come here when former Councillor Negus or Alderman Negus, whoever, did it as well. You are allowed to go to a Combined Authority meeting and make your own case, and I will, you know, make the case for Bristol at those meetings as well. But it doesn't have to be the case that you ask me to speak for you at those meetings. I will do the advocacy for Bristol, but feel free to use your own agency and attend those Combined Authority meetings and ask those questions directly of the Metro Mayor, or you can, outside of those meetings, also directly email. And if you need it, we can provide you with the Combined Authority email or phone number so you can reach out to them.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping to squeeze a few more questions in, but unfortunately we haven't been able to. We've run well over time on that one. So that concludes the questions. I'd like to inform members that, well, I've said that already. Okay, so thank you for that. We are now moving on to agenda item 7, which is petitions notified by councillors. There has been one councillor petition received for this meeting, and councillors are invited to speak on that for 1 minute. So I'd like to invite Councillor Hartley, if he would like to present his petition.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to formally present my petition on saving Bristol Central Library from potential closure to full council. Since I initially submitted the petition, we've received further signatures, meaning the petition now has 751 signatures from across the city, backing our calls to save the Central Library. Furthermore, I would like to draw councillors' attention to a second petition set up by a Bristol resident on Change.org that has gained over 3,300 signatures in 2 weeks and will likely be presented to full council for a full petition debate soon. The local feeling with regard to the library's closure is clear, as we've heard today from the public gallery. A large number of our residents are against any plans to move the Central Library from its current home, a building bestowed to the citizens of Bristol in 1906. This wonderful community facility, which has served the residents of Bristol for over a century, is a truly valuable asset that is owned by Bristol's residents, not Bristol City Council. I sincerely hope the administration will take note of the public's feelings on this and reverse their plans to move the Central Library. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartley. Thank you. So now we move on to agenda item 8, which is the Committee Model of Governance Working Group update. This report is for noting, and I would ask Councillor Holland to move the report as chair of the working group. Councillor Holland, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. And this report, which I'm moving on behalf of the working group, is a real milestone in the development of the work over the last 6 months, along with the report that we took earlier to OSM and the all-member briefing, both in October. So first, we should thank the members of the working group. I think when we were put on it, we didn't realise quite how much work we were taking on, and I'm thank particularly, it's true of everything actually, isn't it, that we take on here, but especially the Vice Chair and fellow knitter, Jenny Bartle, and the other members who've been very much part of this journey with us, and the officers who've supported the work with absolute excellent support. We're all learning together. So as I hope the report shows, an enormous amount of background work has been taking place with information gathering and hearing from expert witnesses to shape our approach to the next stage of the process. And it's been invaluable to hear and the generous giving of their time from the LGA with their expertise and experience of working with councils of all varieties of governance, from the Centre for Public Scrutiny, From Sheffield, whose is the most recent experience of changing to the committee model and the work they did in developing their system freshest in their minds. From Brighton, who have been at this for some time. And from Mike Jackson, just a few days before he left the authority and was able to be very honest about his thoughts and recommendations. These inputs have been invaluable to our work and to framing the questions we all need to be asking ourselves over the next year. So this report very accurately reflects those areas to be worked through, and also, we hope, reassures those who would love to believe that there's a secret plan somewhere in a dusty drawer in this building that the council is just waiting to pull out and reveal to an unsuspecting city. Learning from others and discussing in the working group, we have a much clearer picture of what needs to be put in place before May 24. Including beginning to scope possible numbers of committees, numbers of members on those committees, and it's a simple maths that we do to work out about workload for councillors. The stakeholder engagement that we've held has really been very informative, and it was interesting to hear back from officers about the different tone and tenor and content of the meetings that have been held in the 4 parts of the city. So the working group plans and welcomes the opportunity to hold the meetings, our meetings in public from the new year onwards, as the report says, with a meeting a month. And we've also created a template, which I know we're quite excited about, for individuals and organisations to be able to hold their own sessions, drawing together views and feeding them in. We all love our city and get elected to be able to work together to improve things. Working together, the city will come up with a system that works for Bristol, that keeps the city moving forward with decisions being made in a timely way. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. And now I'd like to call on Councillor Guy Pulteney to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a bit of a personal one for me. I hope that's okay. I was first selected as a candidate for this council for the 2009 local elections, way back when. And my former ward partner, Sean Emmett, now Alderman Emmett, made it really, really clear you have to go out and talk to people. The leaflets are all very well and good, but you've got to get out and you've got to walk the streets and you've got to actually engage. And some of you might remember that the 2009 elections were delayed, so that they'd coincide with the European elections. They were held back. They were going to happen on the 7th of May, and I'm just wondering if anyone can remember what happened on the 8th of May that year. It was the year the expenses scandal broke. And that was the issue on every single door that I knocked on. It was the thing that people wanted to talk about. People were really angry, some people were really sad. Some people were just resigned to it, and for some people their cynicism about politics had just been confirmed. And for a lot of them it wasn't just limited to Westminster or the MPs, it was all of us. You're all the same, it doesn't matter who you vote for, everything's stitched up and no one's listening. Again and again. And a decade later, I'm at the Malcolm X Centre to talk about the second mayoral referendum, and I'm hearing similar things. It was an odd meeting. George Ferguson was there as well, so was Gary, so was Alex, who had proposed the motion, and so was the indomitable Mary Page, who'd gone to organise the campaign, and also there was Mike Norton, the Bristol editor. And Mike threw out a challenge. It's easy to burn the barn down, he said. You haven't told us what you're trying to build. And that's what the committee working group is working on at the moment. What are we trying to build? Some of you might feel that what's presented in the council papers is light on design, and you're right, it is. And it's light because we haven't listened enough yet. Community engagement has started. I was at the Trinity Centre just a few weeks ago with Jenny and Nicola to listen to what people thought. And the community team, by the way, for Bristol City Council, is held in phenomenally high regard by the communities it serves. That team and the organisers of those events, Taylor and Lucy, as well as everyone who attended, deserves a phenomenal amount of credit for the engagement and the work that they put in. What did we hear? We heard that the council needs to listen and listen sincerely. The council needs to be open and transparent and accessible. The council needs to start being honest. Decisions shouldn't be made here, hidden behind process and bureaucracy. and legalistic language, or worse, behind closed doors entirely. Decisions should be made in the wards with the people that get affected by them. People were critical. They were polite, they were friendly, they were thoughtful, they were imaginative, creative and welcoming, and they were engaged. And no one could deny that. The problem is that a lot of people currently feel that the chances of what they have to say making the slightest bit of difference to the decision being made is massively outweighed by the hoops they have to jump through. Ooh, sorry. And in 2009, there was a lot of talk of the Nolan Principles. Selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, honesty, leadership, and transparency. And that's what people tell me they want, and they said it on the doorsteps in Lockleys in 2009, they said it in the mayoral referendum, they've said it at those engagement events, and now they're saying it in every public forum that we have in full council. I very much welcome the pack that Helen mentioned and the email address. We are starting the process of listening to what people say.
Thank you, Councillor Pulteney. Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Jeff Gollop to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And firstly, I welcome this report. It's been a long, slow process, but I have to say I interpret things slightly differently to the way Councillor Pulteney interpreted them. There was never any doubt that we needed to consult and engage publicly. Never any doubt about that. But what is a committee we decided collectively was that we had to understand what the issues were that we were needing to talk through. Because if we went out to the public and said, what do you think? And they said, about what? And we said, we don't know because we haven't talked about it. We wouldn't actually look very clever. So we worked through it. Now, I have to say, I've seen Helen in so many roles in the years I've served in this council, but I'm seeing Helen as the consummate diplomat in a situation where with 12 councillors, there have been at least 15 different opinions expressed at most of our meetings, and actually bringing a consensus out of it is a remarkable skill. And I think, Helen, we've been very fortunate to have you guiding us in that role. But the fact is that we have been listening to a lot of experts giving us advice, and we formulated a clearer picture of where we need to go, and we know that we need to share that with the public. But we also recognise that we still have to do some work to build a potential proposal that we can then seek opinions on. Because whilst people are concerned, they do actually want to know what we're proposing. Now, my group welcomes this report and endorses it, but there are a few points that I'd just like to make on behalf of my group. One is that key decisions need to be made timely and efficiently. And I say that as someone who's always been in the second or third party in this House and recognises I may well not agree with those decisions. But they still have to be made timely and efficiently, whether I agree with them or not, with robust discussion. But the second point is that we don't need to then say we must scrutinise every decision if we need the robust discussion as well. Because actually, robust discussion in a committee model is potentially much more effective than scrutiny can ever be. And I say that as someone who has championed scrutiny over the years. So really important that we understand that. We mustn't duplicate scrutiny and robust challenge, but we must make sure it's open. And finally, I understand, again, Guy's comments about local decision making. But Mike Jackson's incredible contribution to us, one of the comments was, don't object to regional or local decision making, but don't try bringing it in at the same time as you're changing the whole governance process for making decisions, because if you do, both will fail. Really important, we need both to succeed. So we deal with the one we have to first, and we deal with the subsequent issues of local decision making second. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gollop. I'd like to call now on Councillor Alex Hartley to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First, I'd like to thank Councillor Holland, her fellow committee members and council officers that have been working on the new committee structure on behalf of Councillor Kent, who can't be here today, and the rest of the Liberal Democrat group for all the work that you've done since May. I was incredibly proud that a year ago last week, I was able to propose the motion that secured the governance referendum, which led to the victory for the committee system. Local residents made it clear that they wanted to turn their backs on the mayoral system and embrace a more collegiate, more representative and albeit fairer system. I am very glad to see that work is ongoing on bringing in this new system. Lib Dems are keen to make sure the committee's work continues at pace, as this is an all-encompassing change that will affect all aspects of Bristol's governance. While there is a huge amount of work to get through, this chamber must have enough time to scrutinise the committee's findings and the new constitution well before the next set of local elections. Councillor Kent has expressed concerns with the pace of discussions and the lack of a safety net for governance if the work is not completed in time. I'd also like to encourage the working group to do everything they can to ensure the maximum amount of public participation and scrutiny in this process. People of Bristol made it clear that they want to see fundamental reform, and they should also be given the chance to help shape this reform. I'm glad the working group has begun to open up avenues to allow feedback from residents and has and will engage in public meetings, but I would ask that you look at further ways of having the most open, accountable and representative public participation in this process. We are also glad to see the working group is looking at local participation in the new system, and I would challenge them to pursue the highest level of local decision-making possible, whether through area committees or a resurrection of neighbourhood partnerships. Local people deserve the right to have an active role in decision-making on issues that affect their communities. Thank you again for all of the work of the working group. The Lib Dems fully endorse this report and offer the best of luck moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hartley. I'd now like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely agree with Councillor Pulteney. Local working is absolutely essential. And the thought that you can actually change all the decision-making process and then try to graft that on afterwards is just ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. We need to be in a position where we've listened to what the public actually said. And having been campaigning for a move away from the mayor system for quite a number of years, believe me, I've done quite a lot of listening to people who weren't happy with the system. And they didn't just want a couple of things changed at the top. They wanted the whole way that business is done in this council changed completely. And they liked some things, they didn't like others. But we cannot have a position where we bodge something up and then try to change afterwards. What I do agree with you, Jeff, is if the concept that you have all these committees and then have a scrutiny commission system just chasing after it, it doesn't work at all. That should not, though, prevent us having an alternative way for people to bring up ideas and challenge without having the great bureaucracy of a scrutiny system. And that can be done very efficiently if everyone works on the same side to get that actually done. So, yes, the work is progressing slowly, and I do agree we will need to speed up a bit because it is vitally important. Because we've got to get, when we've got to the end of where we think we are in terms of producing a plan, we've got to give plenty of time for the public to be able to react to it and say, we don't like that bit, or we don't like that bit, and we need a change. So we've not got to produce this like a rabbit out of a hat with a month or two before the elections. We must move on quickly and be ready to make amendments as the public react to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Marvin, do you wish to respond to the debate? Okay. Thank you. So, as I said, this report is for noting, and that concludes... What have I done? Oh, so sorry. Oh, yeah. Where have I gone? Yes, you're very welcome to, although it doesn't say it in the script. But please do, of course.
Well, if it doesn't say it in the script, obviously.
Well, that's true.
I'll be very, very quick. Thanks.
No, we want to hear your views.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. Thank you for all of the contributions, all of them very valid. First of all, I think that on pace, there will be greater pace, and because we've been able to scope out what needs to be done. And I think just to reassure you all, those who aren't on the working group, that the officers had envisaged the final report coming the March before the May. And I think that we made it very clear at the last meeting that that needs to be this time next year, so it isn't affected by the pre-election period in 24. So that's one thing. I think it's very likely that we will come back another time in the interim before that December meeting with that outline, and we want to engage with you about it. Just on the issue of timeliness and transparency, I'm very minded that when we had the meeting in South, and Gary was there and Tim, Richard, you were going to be, but it was a night of a monsoon and you couldn't be. One of the things that was said on one of the tables that I sat on during the evening, and it's really stayed with me, is that we go out and kind of ask people about everything without working out which things are relevant to them or to their community and which things they really want to have an influence on. And I think that that is one of the things that the kind of agenda setting of those committees into the future is another question that we need to have. Don't ask everybody about everything. Get the voices of the people who and what their interests are to affect the future of the city. But it has been a really interesting experience being on the committee and chairing it, and I do hope that those principles of working together will last for the next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. And I'd just like to say in a point of information that actually I'm on a learning curve here, and I've just been told that if a report is for noting, you do not have a right to respond at the end. But we were delighted to hear your points, and the only reason I make this point is because the next report is for noting, so we won't be having any responses to the end of that one. Okay.
I take back everything I
you.
said then, Lord Mayor.
So the next report is agenda item 9, which is the Audit Committee half-year report to the full council. This report is for noting. So I'd like to call first on Councillor Andrew Brown to move the report as chair of the Audit Committee, and he's standing ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm conscious that this has been a very long day for councillors. I'm also conscious that we had the annual report of audit at last month's full council and had a full range of views and the debate at that point. So I'm going to largely reserve my remarks, other than to thank the officers that support the committee's work. Alison Taylor and Oliver Harrison from Democratic Services, and Simba Mazarawi and Alison Mullis from Internal Audit. And I move the report.
Charmingly succinct, thank you. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Zoe Goodman to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
My Lord Mayor, as Councillor Goodman's been poorly and risks having a coughing fit if she tries speaking now,
okay.
She's asked me to step in on her behalf, so
absolutely,
if you'll allow me to indulge.
Yeah,
I will be brief. Oh, hang on, I've just gone and deleted the thing. Okay, so it's important that any council has an effective audit committee to dig beneath the surface and find if anything's going wrong and put forward solutions to fix them. This is especially important when you consider the financial challenges we're now facing as austerity is being imposed on us, still more so by this government. Governance agreements generally work well, but the committee is looking at several issues. Going forward, we're going to be looking at internal audit updates, annual whistleblowing review, corporate risk reports, code of corporate governance. It all sounds very wooden, but actually it's very, very important that we actually look at these matters and make sure that everything's working as it should. So I commend this report to the House, and thank you.
Thank you. I'd like now to call on Councillor David Wilcox to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I rise to thank the members of the Audit Committee, in particular Chair Councillor Andrew Brown and Vice Chair Councillor Tony Dyer, and wish to praise the members of the committee for their contributions to the debate with questions that are both insightful and pragmatic. Audit also has two independent members, Adebola Adebayo and Simon Cookson. I thank them for their own personal perspectives on the audit process. I would also like to show gratitude to the officers involved, Simba Mazari, Denise Murray and Tim Borrett and their teams for Indeed, suffering fools gladly and agreeing with the premise that there is no such thing as a dumb question. I cannot underestimate the contributions of the external audit team for Grant Thornton, led by John Roberts. I personally look forward to the next half year of working on all the matters of contention that will be brought to this committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Jonathan Huckett to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I might not be quite so brief, and for that I do apologise. The committee has continued to receive a significant amount of detailed technical information, and our deliberations have been carried out in a spirit of cross-party cooperation and goodwill. I'd like to thank the Chief Internal Auditor and his team for their assiduous work. They have identified several areas which require significant improvement, which is a matter of concern. We must remain sighted on these improvements and track their delivery. The external auditors highlighted a number of breaches of the Council's procurement rules during 2021-22. These have significantly increased from 2020-21 and recommended urgent action should be taken to address this. The committee therefore received a presentation on this issue, which did provide some reassurance that it is being taken seriously. I would also like to thank the Counter Fraud and Investigations team, whose work continues to contribute significant benefits to the authority. I'm surprised that the audit of the 2021-22 accounts is not planned to be completed until January 2023, given the statutory deadline was November 2022. Bristol City Council is therefore not even attempting to comply with this statutory requirement. The committee is concerned at the continuing delay to the completion of the 2021 annual statement of accounts. The statutory deadline for completion was September 2021. So the publication of the Council's accounts is now well in excess of a year overdue. All our neighbouring authorities published their final 2021 accounts many months ago. I appreciate that a national issue around accounting for infrastructure assets is now causing the auditors to delay sign-off. However, the accounts should have been signed off long before this issue was ever raised. An explanatory note was only added to the Council's website when requested by the committee. The assets in question cannot be sold and therefore have no net realisable value. I do not think that any audit adjustment found to be required would have a meaningful effect on the interpretation of the accounts by stakeholders. I have previously suggested that the 2021 accounts should be published with an appropriate qualification. I think this would be more satisfactory than the continued failure to complete and publish the final accounts. It should be noted that the Chief Executive of Public Sector Audit Appointments has said that late completion of accounts is beginning to seriously undermine the financial management, governance and accountability of public bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huggett. I'd now like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
I'll be briefer than that.
Good.
Basically, I think one crucial thing that's got to be borne in mind is that the Audit Committee is not there to find out how much money we lost on this mistake or that mistake. It's there, hopefully, to work in advance so that we actually get the governance right and the decision-making process right. So fairly early on, the committee is going to have to pay some attention to working with the committee model working group so that they can work out, as a different decision-making process happens, how they can be most effective in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Marvin, do you wish to respond? Thank you. Thank you. This report is noted, and this concludes this agenda item. Please note that the next two agenda items on are on the Treasury management. There will be one round of speakers for the two reports, because this was agreed at party group leaders prior to the meeting. So the Treasury Management Annual Report 21 to 22, it's for noting, and I'd first like to call on Councillor Craig Cheney to move the report. You have 3 minutes.
Awkward. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. As you just said, I'll be covering both reports in one go, and to be honest, we'll be making many of the same comments anyway, so it's kind of much of a muchness, really. We're in the unusual position of taking both reports at the same time. Oh, due to some packed agendas for full council meetings of late. I'm comfortable this doesn't cause us particular issues, especially as these have already been debated at Audit Committee, as we've just heard. That said, I would hope that next year we won't find ourselves in the same position. I would like to thank finance officers for their work throughout what has been a fast-paced and ever-changing year. The 21-22 report notes the effects that inflation, rising interest rates and Russia's war in Ukraine are having and the challenges that presents for our Treasury management. The economic climate poses huge challenges for councils around the country, and Bristol sadly isn't exempt from it. We are still seeing huge rates of inflation, are forecasting a national recession and a relatively weak pound. Interest rates, which have been at historic lows, have now been raised to tackle inflation, and so we continue to defer any borrowing. Considering the financial climate facing councils and their investment strategies, we would welcome some form of economic certainty. It was only a year ago that Partygate broke, and we're now on our third Prime Minister and fourth Chancellor since then. Local authorities are still funded on a yearly, last-minute basis. We don't have the local government financial settlement yet, and we don't know what will be happening when the government's energy price cap expires. We don't know how deep a recession will be or how long the economic effects of Russia's war in Ukraine will last. All of this does, of course, influence the Council's Treasury management strategy. We'll continue to plan as best as we can for these situations so that we're prepared as possible for whatever national and international economic circumstances we face. This report is just for noting, and I'm happy to recommend it to Council today.
Thank you, Councillor Cheney. Can I now call on Councillor Mack to speak on behalf of the Green Group?
Come on, technology. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to everyone who's worked on both of these reports and generally takes care of all our money. As I doubt many members here made it through the 40-odd pages of quite dry financial information, I wanted to summarise a few headlines. It made some really important points about what challenging times we are in. Unemployment rates fell to a 48-year low. The shortfall in the labour supply and the economy is still below pre-pandemic levels. The challenges of high energy prices creating a downward effect in the economic activity, stuff I know we all know. The pound fell to a low of $1.035. We are still predicting significant interest rates, but the report also states our portfolio yield was only 1.01 against a comparator of 1.22. So I'd just be interested in how we're doing against that comparator and why. Overall, I can see few issues with how we are managing our funds, and considering the current financial position of the council, obviously this is really, really important. I have just a few comments on the ethics of our Treasury funds. I understand our need to focus on the security of capital and the liquidity according to SIPFA's code, absolutely, but what are the ethical decisions we're making with our Treasury investments? When I chaired the Ethical and Equitable Investment Working Group, we were told that Treasury investments were off limits because of these constraints. This fund states our investments are predominantly with local authorities, money market funds and UK banks. So we do have some choice over this, and I want to ensure that our ethics as a council and how we want to treat everyone is followed through in how we look after our money.
Thank you, Councillor Mack. I'd like to call on Councillor Jonathan Hucker to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I have pleasure in commenting on the Treasury Management Report for the 21-22 full year and 22-23 half year. Throughout this period, borrowings, excluding PFI and service contracts, have remained stable at 451 million. This position is expected to remain the same through to March 2023. Fortunately, these borrowings are at fixed rates, so the Council is not exposed to rising interest rates on this debt. However, the Council continues to hold very large cash balances, and this obviously has a very high carry cost. So this must call into question the timing of the drawdown of this debt. In 2021-22, cash balances increased from 207 million to 237 million, reducing to 196 million in September 2022. The forecast cash balance at March 2023 is 120 million, which obviously means that any further debt drawdown should be deferred. The other issue, which is highlighted, is the continued slippage of the delivery of the capital programme. This obviously calls into question the Council's project management capabilities. The CapEx budget for 2021-22 was 321 million, yet the actual outturn was only 158 million, less than half of the original budget. The CapEx budget for 2022-23 is 300 million, yet the expected outturn is only 248 million, with the entire difference relating to the housing revenue accounts. Investment returns are minimal, but this is to be expected as the Council rightly places security above yield. With such a high cash balance, liquidity is obviously not as critical as an issue as it would be if the Council was operating with a minimal cash balance, which in theory it should be. I think achieving the benchmark sterling overnight index average rate on deposits is satisfactory. I am reassured that the Council invests its surplus cash into high-quality, low-risk counterparties. This is a welcome departure from an earlier policy. I would like to see the report contain a table of loans to Council subsidiary companies showing amounts advanced, repaid and impaired. When I suggested this at Audit Committee, unfortunately it was rejected by officers. Granted, some of this information is available from Cabinet papers and the related parties note in the Statement of Accounts, but I think it would be sensible to include it in the Treasury Management Report for the sake of transparency and completeness. I would also like to see an analysis of interest receivable and received from Council subsidiaries. In 2021-22, the Council wrote off an interest payment of 6.4 million, which was due from Bristol Holding Limited. I think that there should have been disclosure of that in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I'd like to ask Councillor Andrew Brown to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. What a difference a year makes. When we last debated the Treasury Management Policy, inflation expectations were that it was likely to peak at 4 to 5% by the end of that year, and there was an assertion that the government could move to ensure that interest rates remain low. Clearly, the events of the last year have shattered these expectations in ways that we didn't see coming. Last year, I was concerned about the potential the ongoing impacts of Brexit and COVID recovery would have. Instead, this year has been dominated by the impact of Russia's illegal war on Ukraine, the impact that's had on energy markets, and the longer-term impacts of the short-lived Truss premiership. Against this backdrop, I think it's important to add my thanks to the officers whose job it is to ensure the smooth running of the Council's debt and investments and to keep them within the various prudential parameters which are outlined in the report. I continue to support the Council's policies of regularly reviewing the refinancing of its loan book whilst utilising reserves for internal borrowing purposes, particularly whilst the yield on these remains low. When we looked at this in audit, I raised concerns over the practice of lending to other authorities, given the recent events in Thanet. I appreciate that such intra-authority lending is secure, but as more and more authorities face problems, I hope that that gets kept under review in order to protect our own position. I also would like to raise concerns about the reported underspend in the HRA capital budget and hope that measures are taken to increase the pace of budgeted spending on our housing stock. And I'd also like to add to Councillor Harker's call for more detail on our lending to our subsidiary companies as well. I think that was included in last year's report and I think it was missing from this year's. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'd now like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you. Quite a number of financial matters in this council give me concern. Actually, Treasury Management isn't one of them. The reports are reassuringly boring and pretty much in the right place of where they ought to be. It's not the officers' fault that capital expenditure has fallen behind where it's supposed to be. They have to try and plan on the basis that the council does what it says it's going to do. And unfortunately, that doesn't often happen. I think that the only unfortunate thing about these reports is that they are out of date. If you read through both of them, circumstances have changed so dramatically over the last few months that I think that we need a more rapid review on what's actually happening. And in particular, I think that we need to look at the housing revenue account and how we're going to manage the huge amount of money that's going to be needed there to settle things out, because in the last report it was showing spending on that account actually going down, whereas we know what's actually going to be happening. It's going to have to go up by whichever form of spending. So I think that, that it would be welcome if we got an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Marvin, do you wish to respond to the debate? Okay, thank you. These two reports are noted, and that concludes agenda items 10 and 11. So we're now on to agenda item 12, which I just remind everybody is the last agenda item before our little break. So we can all go out and get a cup of tea then. And this is yet another report for noting. I'd like to call on Councillor Lorraine Francis to move the report, as she is chair of the HR committee.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd firstly like to thank Mark Williams, our exiting lead of HR, and welcome Steph Griffin and James Brereton. I'm also the new chair of the HR committee since May this year, and we clearly have a role to look at many items such as terms and conditions of employment, including remunerations of chief executive directors and directors, overseeing and scrutinising the well-being and performance of employment practices of the council and the implementations of its policies. The annual report, which is available to all, captures key messages from the work of the committee during the full year and is accessible. Important actions over the past 6 months and moving forward. Work focused on including all unions in our quarterly meetings, negotiating, for involvement in staff consultations of the Avon Pension Fund around disinvestment from fossil fuel, hearing directly from staff who were experiencing changes to their working conditions, discussing issues related to SEND. Our ongoing issues, it is clear that though there will be many challenges ahead about staff cuts, redundancies, redeployment, which will remain on our radar. Whilst this is going to be a difficult period, we would want to ensure that staff and unions are consulted and heard. As a new team, we will continue to work together in order to scrutinise the ongoing work of HR. You know what I mean by scrutinise. If anyone wants to talk to me in any more details, you know where to find me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Farah Hussain to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this year, the HR committee was involved with the appointment of Director of HR and the Chief Executive. Both processes were fully transparent and every aspect of it was discussed extensively with the committee. Throughout the year, we worked closely with trade union representatives, as any responsible human resource committee should. I look forward to further strengthening those relationships. I thank the Chair for setting up a system where herself and the Vice Chair would have an informal meeting with trade union officials prior to each meeting to discuss the agendas. We can get the best for Bristol City Council staff by working with our unions. The report notes that the pay ratio within the council has been substantially reduced from 120 to 110. I would like to commend the council for its significant work on this. In the private sector, CEOs were paid around 399 times what the average worker is. So we shouldn't understate the work that's gone into making Bristol City Council a more equal employer, while attracting the talent needed to run an organisation of this size and importance. This work is especially important, ties in with our wider work making Bristol a living wage city. In 2018, Bristol City Council became an accredited living wage employer. Earlier this year, Bristol City Council received the Public Sector Award from the Living Wage Foundation. This, alongside the work to reduce the pay ratio within the council, has made Bristol City Council a much fairer employer, especially for those on low pay. News I'm sure we can all welcome. One of our meetings focused on the return to the workplace following COVID. The right to flexible working was highlighted last month as one of the March of the Mummies demands. I was pleased to learn that all Bristol City Council employees have the right to request flexible working, and most employees that could work from home during COVID still have the right to do so. There is, however, work to be done to encourage a higher level of diversity in the mid-level and senior appointments, which I know the committee will be working on next year. In a city as diverse as Bristol and a council that's representative on it, we need to ensure council staff reflect Bristol's populace too. I look forward to working with the HR committee next year to help strengthen Bristol City Council's position as a fair and inclusive employer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And you'll be pleased to know I plan to actually emulate Councillor Brown, whose actual timeliness is only secondary to his love of good single malts, a sentiment I share. The report you've seen, I believe, is accurate and details the work we've done as a committee. A lot of that was done under the chairmanship of Councillor Y, who established it very well, in my view, and carried on by Councillor Francis. We work very effectively as a multi-party body, of course, and that's important. Councillor Francis has mentioned the changing of the guard at the HR court. Yes, we've lost our actual head of HR, Mark Williams, who worked very hard, and also John Walsh, of course. We've got, obviously, the new director of HR, Steph Griffin. We've also got, actually, as head of HR, James Berethard. In my view, we're very fortunate to have two very experienced and competent HR professionals. So I feel sure the HR functions is in safe hands in future.
Thank you, Councillor Eddy. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Sarah Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you. I'd first like to thank the officers involved in the HR committee. I think that they are very open, transparent and open to cooperating with the committee in a really brilliant way. And I'd also like to thank the chairships of both Tim White and Lorraine Francis, who are doing a really great job of bringing together a sort of, as you said, multi-party committee to do some really great work. I'm pleased to see this report a number of positives over the last few years. Specifically things like the health and safety and wellbeing reporting, especially coming out of post-COVID times, or as COVID sort of rises again and things are a little bit uncertain. It's really good to see our staff supported and that monitored throughout. I also enjoy seeing that we are reporting the pay gaps, and it includes a number of different groups of staff, including LGBT plus staff, and I'd like to see that really continued. There are challenges definitely coming up. For example, the recruitment freeze at the moment is creating challenges, and I think that is we need to make sure that every effort is taken to ensure that essential services are maintained properly, even though the recruitment, essential staff are not counted in that freeze. Just make sure that we are able to provide the level of service to our residents and to council staff as we can. I know that the travel policy with the CAS and things like that can cause some issues, but I'm glad to see that we're getting some balance on that. We have seen a number of senior staff changes, and I've been involved in a lot of the recruitment, and that has been positive, although I know that it can cause a bit of disruption for service when senior staff change, and I know we have asked for information on whether that is something that's being seen nationally or not. And I'm also pleased to see the work that's being done to increase diversity in our senior leadership team, although I think that work needs to go further, certainly. I think there are definitely lessons to be learned over the next kind of couple of years, especially with the amount of change that is going on in the council, and we do need to make sure that we take staff with us during these times, and of which there will be a lot in the coming years. But altogether, I think it is very positive, and I am very happy to sit on this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Classic. Finally, Councillor Hopkins.
I'll be very brief. I'm glad that the new officers are settling in well and appear to have a good relationship with the members of the committee, and that's certainly to be welcomed. The only thing that I would point to that hasn't been sorted yet is the misinformation that's been given out in the pay ratios, where extremely highly paid people who are theoretically on temporary contracts are excluded from the calculations, which actually makes it a misleading picture that's given. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Marvin, do you wish to respond to the report? Okay. This report is noted, and that concludes this agenda item. There will now be an adjournment for 20 minutes. Refreshments for councillors are in rooms along the corridor as advised before the meeting, and also the conference hall is available to us. Thank you. The meeting will start again at 4:05. Thank you. Promptly at 4:05, because that's given us about 22 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. At this point in the meeting, we suspect that the meeting is likely to run past the 2.5 hours allowed within the Constitution, which means that we need to move a motion to extend the time to hear the remaining reports and the golden motion, and that's estimated to be an extra 30 minutes. So can I take that as agreed? Any votes against? No? Thank you. Okay. Excuse me. So, agenda item 13 is the golden motion, and this golden motion is called Taking Back Public Control of Our Buses. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech. I'd like to ask Councillor Andrew Brown of the Liberal Democrat Group to move the motion. Busy man today, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, the longer this meeting goes on, the more thankful people will be that I reserved my remarks earlier on. Thank you, my Lord Mayor. There are all sorts of reasons why Bristol's buses are failing our citizens, but anyone who lives in Bristol, particularly those who live in the outlying communities like, to pick one at random, Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward, will tell you that these aren't just down to the pandemic and the current driver shortage. The truth is, the service has been struggling for years. Indeed, in 2019, this chamber debated a petition signed by 3,793 citizens of this city, calling on the Mayor and the then Metro Mayor to adopt a bus franchising system. Council also passed a motion which, sadly, diluted the Lib Dem call for adoption of a franchising system to such an extent that it made it meaningless. More recently, 1,600 people, as we heard earlier on in the public gallery, 1,600 people across the region have signed a letter calling for the same now. This is not a niche issue restricted to political nerds, and support is now more widespread across this chamber as well, and that's why it's right to bring this motion again. 3 years down the line from the last motion, we find ourselves in a chicken and egg situation. Without reliable and frequent buses, substantial modal shifts of journeys in the city will be unobtainable. But without substantial modal shifts, bus operators can continue to pool services, curtail routes, and cancel services with little notice. So here we are again, despairing of the service and wondering what is to be done. How can we, on behalf of the public, wrestle back control of our bus service? How can we, as councillors, provide our citizens with the service they deserve? Of course, there is no magic bullet, but we do have levers that we can pull. Unfortunately, the lever that the Metro Mayor has chosen to pull is that of an enhanced partnership with the bus operators. This appears fatally flawed from the off, though, given that it gives the region's biggest bus operator an effective veto. Who is partnering with whom, one wonders. Bus franchising would allow WECA to directly commission services that meet the needs of our residents at affordable prices on buses that are fit for purpose. So what is the motion calling for? Two simple things. One, that the WECA Mayor takes a serious look at the bus franchising option, commissions a comprehensive feasibility study that explores the option in full rather than dismisses it in an offhand fashion. And two, that the Mayor discusses this with his counterparts from neighbouring authorities to get their support for a feasibility study. We in this chamber are obviously concerned about the service for our residents in Bristol, but the problem transcends borders, affects our neighbours. I urge members to support the motion so that we can take a step forward towards breaking the vicious cycle of bus cuts, reduce usage and further cuts, and take the power of route and price setting away from the bus company executives and put it in the hands of local people and their representatives.
Thank you. Councillor Varney, can I ask you to rise to second the motion, please?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm sure all of us have metaphorical mailbags groaning under the weight of complaints from our local residents regarding the appalling state of the bus service in Bristol and the wider West of England region. I'm sure many of us have experienced firsthand some of these problems. Just recently, I went to a friend's birthday party in Clifton. Much revelry ensued, and so I decided to catch the last number 1 bus home to Brislington. However, when I got to the bus stop, I discovered that the last bus had been cancelled, a bus upon which many people were surely depending and who were subsequently left stranded in various parts of the city. Luckily, I saw that the last number 2 bus to Stockwood was still running, so I decided to catch that, get off at Broadwalk Shopping Centre in Knowle and walk 20 minutes down Talbot Hill to my house. Unfortunately, the driver had other ideas and decided to ignore the timetable and terminate this service in the city centre, effectively cutting off South East Bristol to late-night travellers. Understandably, the passengers kicked up such a fuss that the driver relented and completed the journey as scheduled. My Lord Mayor, if this were an isolated example, it would be forgivable, but incidents such as this occur far too regularly. Almost every day, buses are seriously delayed or cancelled altogether. Bus routes are curtailed or withdrawn without consultation, and popular ticket options such as the 3-stop hop are simply removed. The timetable is such a magnificent work of fiction, I'm surprised it hasn't won the Booker Prize. In fact, we have 3 timetables here in Bristol, a printed version, a digital display at bus stops, and the so-called live timetable on the phone app, none of which agrees with the other. My Lord Mayor, Bristolians have suffered enough, and we can't continue like this. Doing nothing is no longer an option. The good news is it doesn't have to be this way. As Councillor Brown has said, since 2017, the opportunity has existed for local authorities to have a greater say in the running of their buses, principally through public control of ticketing, routes and timetables for the benefit of the travelling public. A few years ago, the Bristol Liberal Democrats campaigned for bus franchising, but this Labour administration and other opposition parties let the people of Bristol down and failed to support it, preferring to keep the status quo of a bus service that is run for the benefit of private shareholders. I hope on this occasion they will not make the same mistake again, and I would actually like to thank them for a positive contribution to our motion on this occasion. Our request is a simple one, that the Mayor of Bristol helps to get the ball rolling and encourage our regional mayor to commence a comprehensive feasibility study into bus franchising for our region as soon as possible. Time is of the essence, so if Marvin hasn't sent down a Christmas card just yet, perhaps he can pop the letter in with that. Thank you very much and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor. There has been a Labour amendment to the Liberal Democrats' Golden Motion. So it's been published online as a supplement to the meeting earlier this afternoon. And I would now like to ask Councillor Tim Rippington of the Labour Group to move the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I fear there'll be quite a lot of repetition in the room today because we all have buses very close to our hearts. But our bus services are in crisis, but this crisis isn't purely the result of COVID or Brexit. When I first started to campaign to become a councillor in 2019, the bus service in my ward was already a major concern for many residents. Large swathes of Brislington were not covered by any regular service, and some of the services that did run were infrequent and often cancelled. So let's not kid ourselves that the privatised system was working, but has just been the victim of circumstance. Public transport should be a public utility, as it is in many other countries across Europe and indeed the world. The privatisation experiment has failed. Franchise systems are still a form of privatised system. There's a level of public control, but not ownership. There are many reasons why we should bring our buses back into public ownership. Public services put people's needs before profit, whereas private companies make a profit from public services by cutting corners or underinvesting. Indeed, the current system prevents private companies from even cross-subsidising unprofitable services from the more profitable ones, leaving the taxpayer to foot the bill. That's ridiculous. You pay through privatisation, both directly in fares and indirectly by money going to
Tim,
shareholders.
can I stop you for a second? We seem to have some fervent waving from Councillor Gollop. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
No, I'm sorry,
Point of
Madam
order,
Mayor,
sorry.
but we don't have a copy of this by any means.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
So I don't see how we can
Yes.
debate an amendment if we've not even seen it. And
That's-
it's normal practice for
Well,
us
let's
to
get it
see before
circulated.
it's
And
moved.
if we need to adjourn while it's circulating and you read it, let's do that.
Well, to be honest, Councillor Gollop, the reason why I didn't notice you was because I was trying to find out where I could see it. So it does.
Yeah, it's not on MudGov.
So, and I thought it would be on the screen.
Because normally, Lord Mayor, we get it emailed as well as on Modern Gov. and
It was
it's in
circulated to
neither.
PGLs and whips yesterday.
Yeah, but it needs to go to everyone. We didn't have the full version.
Can I... Yeah.
Okay, we've got a bit of a problem here. It was circulated to party group leaders yesterday. I think what we need to do is have a short adjournment because I was confused. I didn't know what we were talking about. So I think we need to actually see a printed copy of it and read the amendment. I think
It's not our fault
it been published?
if it was circulated and nobody did. It wasn't published when it should have been.
Oliver can publish it now. Oliver can publish it now. We can take, how long will it take? 5 minutes to get copies printed? Okay. So what we're going to do is, it's going to be published, it's going to be emailed to Matty General, and we're going to print out some copies in 5 minutes. Unless we don't need the printouts, because we could just... Does anybody need printouts? Just email to Matty General, take a couple of minutes to read it. I'm not going to set you back to start though. So talk amongst yourselves for 5 minutes and read your amendment. I've spoken to Councillor Rippington, and I have said that he can make a speech, but he's got to cut out some of the anecdotes about Brislington, and he's got to go straight to his arguments. And he's going to make a very powerful and forceful argument in about 2 minutes, I think. Would that be fair?
2.5.
Okay. Okay. Ready, steady, go.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
He gets to negotiate
Is
with
my
you and I
microphone actually
don't.
working? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fortunately, my speech hasn't been cancelled altogether. It's just been truncated. Public transport should be a public utility, as it is in many other countries across Europe and indeed the world. The privatisation experiment has failed. Franchise systems are still a form of privatised system. There's a level of public control, but not ownership. There are many reasons why we should bring our buses back into public ownership. Public services put people's needs before profit, whereas private companies make a profit from public services by cutting corners and underinvesting. Indeed, the current system prevents private companies from even cross-subsidising unprofitable services from the more profitable ones, leaving the taxpayer to foot the bill. As I said before, that is ridiculous. Franchise services are not perfect. We have a franchise rail system in the UK. It has been an abject failure. As the railways have proven, publicly owned should be the preference over franchised. We do, however, recognise that bus franchising might be a better option than pure privatisation at this point in time. It should certainly be seriously looked at. It may not be the panacea that a lot of people think it is, however. Research suggests that a franchising model is less suitable to regions with a single dominant operator, in Bristol's case Firstbus. The buses will still be run by operators who will need to make a profit for their shareholders, meaning that the taxpayer-funded contracts they sign with the operating authority will be more expensive than they should be. We desperately need a change to the way our bus services are run. We therefore support the call for franchising to be looked at again and more thoroughly by WECA. But we should not bind ourselves to it if a better option, public ownership, becomes available in the near future. Public ownership is Labour Party policy, and with national elections in 2024 and the current state of the opinion polls, this could very well happen soon. So should the ban on publicly owned companies be overturned, this solution, we think the best solution, needs to be on the table too. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate your amendments to your speech. Thank you. I now ask Councillor Breckles to second the amendment.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'd like to second what is a friendly amendment. The immediate crisis is caused by a driver shortage, and no one's disputing that. But the real underlying causes are austerity and deregulation. Public transport has been deliberately underfunded for a decade now and deregulated for almost 40. The result, fares have doubled in real terms, and the number of bus journeys being made has been declining nationally. It's not sustainable. Some council-owned bus companies still operate in the UK, such as in Nottingham, which is very successful. But what's so crazy about so-called privatisation is it only blocks British public ownership. Arriva is owned by the German government, which is also the majority shareholder in Stagecoach. So, a few questions. If bus companies are a sensible investment for the German government, why would the same not apply for the British government or local authorities? 40% of bus companies' revenue is public money, so why don't we have a 40% stake in the bus services in Bristol? Finally, millions of pounds of taxpayers' money was pumped into private bus companies across the UK in the pandemic. Why wasn't it all spent on improving bus services rather than going into the pockets of private shareholders and foreign governments? It's insane to socialise the losses but privatise the profits, but that's exactly what's happening now. And that won't change under a franchise model. We'd have public control, but not public ownership. In a publicly owned model, the shareholders would be the people in our region. Franchising our bus services is a potential long-term solution, but it's not an immediate fix. Under current laws, it will take Greater Manchester 8 years to establish their franchises. It seems increasingly likely that the law stopping combined authorities and councils from setting up publicly owned companies will be scrapped within 3 years by 2025. So, if we're looking for a long-term solution, it's right that we at least assess the viability of all the possible solutions after the next general election. And it's the Labour Group's view that a region-wide, publicly owned bus network would be the best option available at that time. Franchising is good, but public ownership is better. Public ownership has one key benefit over a franchise service. All profits will be reinvested into improving the service for everyone. This amendment simply asks that the current ban is overturned, giving combined authorities more freedom and the right to set up a publicly owned bus network. In the meantime, WECA should still look at franchising. We're not under the impression that the ban will be overturned tomorrow, but it may well be scrapped before any franchising system is up and running. So let's be practical and keep our options open. Please support a sensible and friendly amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Breckles. We'll now hear from speakers on the amendment, and I'd first of all like to call on Councillor Carla Denyer to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Green Party is clear that public transport should be under public control, run in the public interest, not for the benefits of shareholders. Green councillors in Bristol and Bath have been lobbying the West of England Mayor, past and present, for years about cuts to bus services and a call to consider franchising. So we welcome both the motion and this amendment. This amendment rightly adds the goal of public ownership of buses and adds actions to bring this about as soon as possible, while keeping in recognition that, unfortunately, setting up council-owned bus companies is currently prohibited by the Bus Act 2017. So while Greens will push nationally and locally for a change to that legislation, realistically, it may not be coming imminently. Franchising, as has already been mentioned by others, is not perfect, but it is, I believe, the best tool currently available to local authorities to exert some much-needed control over the quality of our local bus services. Franchising would offer a way for the West of England Combined Authority, run by Labour's Dan Norris, to take public control of bus routes, frequencies and fares through a model similar to London and recently adopted in Manchester. Greens would have been happy to work on a joint amendment or an altered motion with Labour and the Lib Dems to make all of these points. So I do just want to voice a small note of regret that Labour didn't share this amendment with other parties until yesterday or collaborate on a cross-party motion, which we would have been happy to do. This Labour amendment says specifically, partway through, further measures are needed to address the bus crisis in the immediate term. I agree, and it would be great to hear specifically what the Labour Councillor Group considers these measures are, especially as we're aware that across the city Labour politicians have some differing views on the subject. Finally, as Greens, we welcome this common cause with the Labour Group on public ownership of buses, and we invite them to also join the Greens and the majority of the British public in clear support of public ownership of water and energy too. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Mark Weston to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Well, I'm sure my comments to follow will not come as any great surprise to many people here. So Merry Christmas to you all. Yeah, I'm getting that in before the booing begins. Thank you very much. Let's be clear. I think earlier on, when I was talking about there are very few things that probably unite this chamber, and I talked about, letterboxes at waist height on the edge of a property, that's probably one. The fact that First Bus is running an abysmal service is probably another. We will probably all agree that. My wife is epileptic, she can't drive, so we rely on the bus service to get to work to move out the city. So we deal with the problems of the ghost buses that materialise and vanish almost at will. I'm not quite sure Scooby-Doo should come here. I'm sure it's down to those dastardly kids somewhere. It actually was in Station Road. They pulled the isolator switch at the back. But anyway, we all agree on that. Where we're going to fall apart, I think, is where the solution takes us after that. The main problem the buses have got at the moment is a shortage of drivers. That is the main, I'm not saying it's the only, but that is the main one. That's certainly exacerbating every other problem that we're having. But the franchise model, the public-owned model, doesn't solve any of those problems, any of that problem. There isn't a lever that any of us can pull and 200 drivers are just going to appear. And in fairness, and it's in the report that to the WECA on the 16th, there does actually seem to be steps taking on that problem. Now, the franchise model isn't perfect, but I'm relatively agnostic on it. I come from Merseyside. We have Mersey Travel. We sort of operate on a similar scheme, and it works quite well. We certainly wouldn't stand in the way of a report coming back on that. But we're no longer debating the Golden motion. We're now debating an amendment. And the idea that publicly owned bus companies is going to be some great panacea, I'm sorry, it's truly not. It's like the utopian vision of a publicly owned energy company. Well, nothing can go wrong there. Hang on. Do we really want to hand the keys to the transport network to the same organisation or similar organisation that ran that into the ground? I think not. Talking about socialising the risks, actually moving to a publicly owned model does socialise everything. It socialises the risk, it socialises the lot, and it socialises the massive bailout that will be required when it invariably hits the wall. I'm afraid publicly owned is not going to work. The franchise model has some merits to it. So, as I said, we wouldn't stop that. But expecting us to suddenly find millions of pounds of what will no doubt be the bailout required, without it actually solving the problem of driver shortage, is delusional. I'm sorry, it's simply not going to happen. It is a nightmare before Christmas from which there is no awaking. So we're not going to support that. And I have to say, it wouldn't be a Labour amendment if it didn't involve a letter to the government. I think that's every single amendment so far that seems to have that in it. So congratulations on that. But my Lord Mayor, although we might have had some sympathy and some support for the Golden, there is no way we can back a motion or amendment today that, quite frankly, will cost the taxpayer millions in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. Councillor Andrew Brown, I ask you to rise to your feet yet again.
Second last time, I promise. So I'm not precious. I know I've not got all the answers, and I'm open to constructive feedback on what I do. In the spirit of that, I was happy to work with members from the Green Party on potential alterations that would have improved the motion as drafted. Unfortunately, Labour did not want to agree to those proposals as an altered motion, and the Green Party has opted not to bring them as an amendment for reasons I understand and accept. So regrettably, we're in this position where Labour have chosen not only not to work with our parties in order to improve the motion, but they've brought an amendment of their own. I really feel that as a result of that, we have lost an opportunity to strengthen the motion, the case for franchising, and at least some of the impetus for change. Anyway, so now I've got that off my chest. Where do I and my group stand on the Labour motion? Well, I worry that this is a bit of a distraction. By focusing on a solution that is not available to WECA, we dilute the central message of this motion. Tools which would allow greater public control of existing buses now, why shouldn't we grab a hold of those? Why should we hold out for some other option that's not on the table? We should not let the perfect, at least in the eyes of the mover of the amendment, be the enemy of the good. It is highly unlikely that this Conservative government will legislate for publicly owned bus companies, so why are we debating it? Now, I know there's going to be an election at some point, but it's not even clear where Starmer's Labour stand on this issue. Sure, the 2019 Labour manifesto promised it, but when I wanted to check the up-to-date position, I found that the Labour Policy Forum website states that it is undergoing essential maintenance and will have limited functionality for a while. You can draw your own conclusions, but mine is it's clear that even after a much-needed general election, the ability to take public ownership of buses will not necessarily be an option for authorities. And even if the Labour Party did win and were minded to introduce this, it would take some time for those measures to get through Parliament, and we'd be even further down the track before we were even exploring that as an option. Now, I'm not against public ownership. I grew up using publicly owned buses, complete with conductors who came down and took your fare. And I remember with some fondness the service in Edinburgh before I moved down south. But the truth is, it's not an option at the moment, as I've said. Labour's position seems to be that franchising will take too long to implement, so instead they're going to advocate for something that isn't even an option instead. Anyway, all that being said, I'm going to take my own advice and not let the good be the enemy of, in my estimation, the not quite so good. The amendment retains the existing calls for, and so my group will support the amendment and ask that, if passed, Council supports the amended motion.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'd like to now call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, well done for getting in first about the energy company, because you beat me to it. But there's other instances as well. Some years ago, even before I became a councillor, this authority used to own Bristol Airport. And it never made any money. Now, a lot of people would be quite happy about that because there was very few planes taking off. But when it was sold by this authority, by God, hasn't it made a lot of money since? We used to have the docks as well. And basically what happened, those who were councillors at that time should remember that every year, cap in hand, there was, we need some more money to stop it from closing. That's what happened every year. When this authority runs things, it doesn't do it well. Basically now with the docks situation, we've got a 12.5% shareholding in that, and we take a dividend for doing nothing. And that's quite good, I think. And that's more akin to the franchise model. We do need to make certain that the bus service is run for the benefit of the people, not for the benefit of shareholders. Funnily enough, in actual fact, before I knew this motion was coming up, I had a meeting with Dan Norris, and the subject of franchising came up. And basically, he's sort of agnostic a bit. But let's not forget, we've got Baines much in favour, North Somerset, who must come in really into the equation, in favour. And this authority, now we've got a mayor after fighting against it for so long, I think there's a majority here now would go for franchising. So we can all work together on this model, which I think is something that would benefit the whole of the west of England. One thing also that Mr Norris was in favour of was having a precept. He said, well, you know, in Manchester, the mayor there could put out something that had put 2 or 3 pence on a council tax across the whole of Manchester, and that provides services. Well, we had a bus meeting at Mr Norris's request in our ward, and basically quite a number of people turned up, and we put the various questions to them. Are you in favour of the way that the business should be run? And actually, the majority wanted franchise, and they actually understood it, and that's what they wanted. We said, were you in favour of the mayor having the opportunity to issue a precept on the council tax? No, they said. No, we're not, definitely not having that. But if he could improve the bus services dramatically, then...
Excuse me, Gary, can I just draw your attention that your time is almost up, and I just wonder if you focus on the amendment. I'm not quite sure whether
well,
you're...
It is on the amendment. And the amendment is actually saying...
Are you supporting it, or if we could get to that point?
Absolutely not. I think a few people got the clue that we're not. Public ownership is a public disaster, and it's proved that way in this council time after time. But we do need a system where we can control fares, timetables, and get the private operator to take far more of the risk.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Councillor Tim Rippington, you have an opportunity to respond to the debate as the mover of the amendment.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll keep it brief. Apologies for the confusion, first of all. It certainly wasn't our fault. You should have had the motion in plenty of time, but clearly something went wrong. But as far as much else, I think we agree on much of this motion. Carla, in terms of water and other things, I think we'll get there. May take a bit more time, but I think we'll get there. Mark, the bailouts have already happened. We've given millions to private bus companies during the pandemic. We should have taken that opportunity to take control of the buses, to be honest, but we didn't. Public ownership is not some myth, British Rail ran from 1945 until the 1990s and publicly owned buses for a similar amount of time. I remember them both with fondness. We're trying to reinvent history by claiming it can't be done, but clearly it was done for a very long time. Andrew, we welcome the Liberal Democrat support for public ownership. I'm sure the Royal Mail workers striking tomorrow won't have forgotten that it was actually Vince Cable, a Lib Dem, who sold off Royal Mail. So I'm pleased the party has now seen sense. And Gary, we've been asking for more money every year since I've been a councillor to prop up the subsidised services which are essential to many people but which private companies can't and won't run. So that's nothing new. As Marvin said some time ago, it's not just about the system, it's also about putting the money in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rippington. Councillor Brown, as a mover of the substantive motion, would you like to respond to the debate on the amendment?
I feel like I've spoken almost as many times as Councillor Hopkins tonight.
And that's a lot.
For the sake of clarity, is there a further opportunity to respond at the end of... It's my last opportunity to respond. On the amendment. I'm not going to add any more to the debate on the amendment.
Okay, we will now move to a vote on the amendment. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure that you're in your allocated seat so that your vote is correctly recorded. You are voting on the amendment and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Yeah, all ready? Okay. If everybody's in their seats, we'll just give a couple of people time to get back in their seats. Yeah. Okay, please vote now. Okay, so the amendment was successful. So we will now hear from speakers on the motion, which is the one that's on the table now, which is the amended motion. I'd like, first of all, to call on Councillor Katja Cornchin to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor and members. Can you hear me? Yeah. Councillor Bennett was meant to speak this evening, but his flight was cancelled, so he's stuck in Berlin. He will be appreciating the fully nationalised public transport that doesn't work. Indeed, there's been a massive investment into the Berlin system in the last 20 years. Meanwhile, our government put millions into propping up private bus companies in the pandemic, with little to show for the investment. While in my ward, Brislington East, I'm listening to residents worried about cutting their local bus. An elderly resident was quite tearful, and not only can he no longer go to the doctors on time, he will struggle to get his prescription, let alone visit his friends up the hill in Brislington. But I guess his journey was not profitable. A mother was concerned the lack of public transport meant her son had limited options which A-level college he could attend, as there was only one that he could walk to. Oh no, there we go. But I guess it's not a profitable journey. Patients recovering from mental illness in a hospital on a known route in Councillor Bennett's ward cannot take a trip into town as the bus has been cancelled. This is affecting the rehabilitation of the patients. I guess this is not a profitable journey. I hope we can send a strong message to Weka, First Bus and the government that Bristol expects better. Bristol residents expect a democratic say in how their public transport infrastructure is run. Buses should be a community asset, making our daily lives easier, less polluting and connecting us with our jobs, leisure, family and friends. How do we go about designing a good transport system if even the numbers of the commuters are a commercially sensitive secret? I am not under any illusion that this will solve all our immediate problems. I still very much hope the government will step in to help the combined authorities address the crisis in the short term. Let's look at the options available to us. Franchising, or our preferred option, nationalising. Why should shareholders in a faraway place profit from our residents' needs? Go with the one that delivers the best service for the Bristol people of Bristol. Let's work with WECA and FIRST to tackle the immediate challenges, ask WECA to look in franchising in the medium term, and then how we can bring them into public ownership in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Plowden to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. So now we're debating a motion in line with Green Party policy, which is for public ownership of public goods, including public transport, locally and nationally. But let's not get distracted from the main focus of today, one that's actually legal right now, whether to franchise the buses or not. Growing the bus market will not only improve health, air quality, the public realm, and make our transport system more equitable. More than this, it will increase employment and productivity and tackle congestion, good for business and our mutual prosperity. Why franchising? Let's look at the facts. Bus patronage in the 25 years pre-pandemic in London grew by 97%, where franchising is the model. In cities outside the capital, we saw a 34% decline. Britain is the only country in Europe that has trusted its bus system to the free market, and this experiment has failed, as Councillor Rippington has said. Indeed, there are plenty of scenarios where private profit can be increased by not growing the market, possibly even shrinking it. Yes, franchising will take some years to come into effect. And such is the state of the market right now, we need some drastic improvements ASAP. But it will take a lot less time and trouble now that Manchester has established the precedent and it's been tested in law. And just the threat of franchising will sharpen the minds of First Bus bosses. Maybe HQ in Aberdeen will stop aiming for 12% profit from Bristol and accept the norm of more like 5 to 6% across London operators. This is because franchising will give other operators a fighting chance to break into what is currently a near monopoly. This could quickly drive improvements, possibly even to drivers' paying conditions, helping to tackle current shortages. The smaller operators, Kent Western, do not have problems with their training and recruiting and retaining their staff. The other option available is an enhanced partnership model, which may be quicker and remains a fallback option, but gives us fewer levers and actually risks entrenching the First Bus monopoly and veto. Is that what we want? And this motion, requiring a comprehensive feasibility study, is the first essential set out by the 2017 Act. A study doesn't commit us to franchising, but we can't proceed without one, and it's actually an essential plank in assuming municipal control. And if you have a commitment to evidence-based policy, then we need the facts as to what the benefits can be. And by the same logic, the scope of the study must also consider opportunities a transport precept can bring. I agree with Councillor Hopkins. The West of England languishes at the bottom of the league for transport funding per head. As the Mayor said earlier, there's no substitute for money. The viability of different precept levels and possible return on investment for the public really needs to be explored, along with other funding sources and benefits. And once again, just studying the options doesn't commit us to actually doing it. Re-establishing public control over our buses is a first step towards a clear transport vision this region and Bristol desperately needs. One run for the benefit of and accountable to the public, embedded into wider city policy and budgets. We can have a progressive and strategic city transport system. Let's start the work now.
Thank you, Councillor Plowden. I'd like now to call on Councillor John Goulandris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. My colleague Mark Weston, I think, has articulated our group's view very well. We all know that we need to do something about the bus network. It's not working well. We all agree on that. In fact, there were many aspects of the original motion, unamended, which attracted us. There are powers in WECA to actually improve the bus service. We need to work with WECA. We can look at lots of things, enhanced partnerships, franchising. We're open-minded to a lot of things. And we know we need to do something quickly and speedily and locally. We also need to work with the bus company to try and get some more bus drivers, because that actually is the key to unlocking the immediate problems. If you go onto the bus stops of Bristol, When you say to people, what do you want? They say, we want a better bus service. When do you want it? Now, is the cry. They don't want letters written to government. They don't want some pie-in-the-sky nonsense about public ownership. They want better bus services now. We can only achieve that by working with WECA. The original motion had a lot of attraction, a lot of common sense in that, but I'm afraid it's been hijacked by playing politics. You're trying to kick this into some political long grass. This is really shameful. Bristol deserves better. Bristol needs action now. It doesn't need some pie-in-the-sky nonsense. So it won't surprise you that we will now be voting against this motion as it's been amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galandras. I'd like now to call on Councillor Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Local Community Party.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Well, firstly, I want to agree with Councillor Plowden on some things, because although it will take several years to bring in a franchising system, the threat of it coming along the track is enough to make First Bus start to behave themselves a little bit better. We've got a give and take partnership with them at the moment. We give, they take. And it is not very satisfactory for the Bristol public. In fact, it's disastrous, and it has been that way for quite some while. The advantage of a franchise system is that, yes, you will be out subsidies on some routes, but you can also make money on some of the other routes as a franchisor. So basically, overall, although there's still a risk, and there's a risk with everything you do, the political risk is lower with franchising. And I think that the Metro Mayor can be persuaded that franchising, or given an intent to franchise, look at franchising in the near future, given that that can get support from the other authorities, is a valid threat that First Bus will take into account. If he says, well, I think we're going to try and go for public ownership, they'll fall about laughing, because basically they know it's not going to happen. And even if this authority has said, oh, we want to consider it, the others won't. So basically, we're not in a position where we put any leverage against First. So we must be persuading the Metro Mayor to say to him, look, I think there'd be support for you going for a precept if you could deliver a proper bus service for the people of the west of England. And you've got to use that as a lever to, in the short term, before you can bring the system in, to get First Bus to behave and actually look to give a proper service to the people of Bristol and the west of England. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Marvin, do you wish to respond to the motion?
I mean, just on a couple of points, maybe for Mark and his group. We are working, well, for everyone actually, you mentioned it, we are actually working with the Combined Authority, you know, as a city to try and solve this. And actually, we're working directly with the bus company as well. I've had personal conversations myself with, you know, with the the director of First Bristol, and I'd say that actually the structure we set up through the city office obviously gives them a regular touch point as well to talk to not just us, but our hospitals, our universities, our FE colleges, our faith groups, community-based organisations, voluntary sector as well, about the challenges that they face meeting the needs of Bristol. I think it is a challenge for us. We see it, which is inherent in the nature of a relationship, is that they're not accountable to Bristol. Ultimately, they're accountable to shareholders somewhere else, which comes to this question of ownership, which I think it is the case that public transport is not some abstract, that alongside housing, health and education, these are public goods. We know they're essential to economic inclusion. They're an essential ingredient of public health, and increasingly, as we are aware, a key part of how we're going to meet our carbon challenges for Bristol as well. Because the tool is so important, I don't think we can leave it to chance that a board somewhere through their market prism is going to say we should deliver for Bristol. We are just another market for them, and actually having ownership of that vital local tool of shaping Bristol life is the future. No one is out there saying any golden pills. As I said, it takes money. On the point about letters to government, again, we talked to a member of the public earlier on about the way government works. That is the way government works. I mean, it is about writing letters back and forth, but it's not just about the letters. The letters are one of the first points of contact in which you make a case. But clearly then through our other networks, be it core cities, through LGA, or direct connection, we then also have the conversations with senior civil servants and and ministers directly as well about what we're actually looking for. But you don't do that without first approaching them through a letter. It's just a key part of that interaction we have to undertake with government. But that's probably enough for me.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Brown, you do get your final summing up now.
Here we go. I'd like to thank people for the debate, and I'd like to thank people for the constructive contributions. I know there's been a little bit of knockabout. I know I was guilty of that as well. I had things to get off my chest, but I do welcome the constructive comments as well. I welcome the Mayor's support for at least looking at the franchise possibility and feasibility of franchising. Councillor Plowden and Councillor Hopkins mentioned the precept. I don't think I'm breaking any confidences by saying that was one of the things that the Green Group had looked to put into my motion, and I think it would have strengthened it if we had had a conversation around how we finance the buses going forward, because I think that will be part of any conversation that, in feasibility study of franchising. There was talk about the dominant operator, and again, Councillor Plowden made the point that in a franchising model there could be potential to break that domination by one operator and have a more multi-operator model. There was lots of talk about the public ownership, but it really isn't feasible at the moment. So I think we should press ahead. And I appreciate the administration's position that that in due course public ownership may become an option, at which point, yes, we should look at feasibility. But in the meantime, we really should be ploughing ahead, pulling the levers that we have available for us. Councillor Galandra said that people want an improvement to their bus services now, and he's right. And there are other things that could and should be done in the short term. But the best time to pursue to pull the trigger on a franchising feasibility is now, or rather, the best time was probably in 2019 when we discussed it in this chamber before. But the second best time is now. So I would like to see us supporting this motion. By all means, if you want to pursue looking at public ownership as and when that becomes available, and writing to the government, that's great. But if we can get moving on trying to get towards a feasibility study of franchising to take back control of the buses for our residents, we really need to do that.
Thank you. Going to move to the vote. Thank you. We're going to move to the vote now. It will be an e-vote, so please ensure that you're in your allocated seat so that you can vote accurately and it's recorded properly. The voting on the motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. We're just waiting till everybody's in place. Are we ready? Okay, thank you. Can you please vote now? So with 44, 14 against and 2 abstentions, the motion has been carried. Congratulations. Thank you. That's funny. Okay, so we still have time. We've agreed to go on till 5:30, so we've got time to fit in the silver motion, which is making Bristol a CPR-friendly city. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the proposing speech, and I'd like to ask Councillor Steve Smith of the Conservative Group to move the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I'm very proud to move this motion today, and I would like to start by thanking those who spoke earlier in public forum, particularly Louise and the Pelledri family, who I understand are watching on YouTube as we have this debate. I say to them, you have inspired a lot of people over the last 10 months or so, and they're phoning me to tell me they're watching it. That's how up to date they are. Sorry about that. Louise, you've inspired a lot of people, and many more in this room this afternoon, I think. So thank you for being here and doing that. Sam's death in February obviously was a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that is multiplied by the fact that he is far from the only person to die in that way. We read in Louise's statement of 12 young people every week in this country. That's 12 people, young, fit, healthy people like Sam, never mind the rest of us, dying of cardiac arrest, and they don't have to die. Early defibrillation and effective CPR could take the chance of survival from 6% to 74%. 6 to 74, that's massive. And we can do that. But it's not enough just to have defibrillators. Sam was surrounded by defibrillators, but they were all behind closed doors. Defibrillators have to be accessible to the public, and they have to be registered on the national system. So when somebody calls 999, the ambulance service can tell them where it is, how to find it, how to use it. And people also need to have the skills to be able to do CPR and to use the defibrillator. And I thank those members who took the time this morning at the start of a very long day to come and learn those skills here in the conference room. It's not that hard to do effective CPR. It's not that hard to use a defibrillator. But trust me, I've been in that position when someone collapses in front of you. Knowing what to do changes everything. It really does. So this motion asks the council to give people, or to help to give people, the equipment and the skills that they need to save lives. But I'm not asking today for the council to pay for everything. With one small exception, there's a little cheeky ask in there. The motion does ask for one defibrillator on the outside of this building that's publicly accessible. That would require paying for. It's not a huge sum of money, and it's a really powerful statement that we're serious about this. But aside from that, this motion is not asking for money. This motion is asking for the council's connections, its influence, its communication channels. And there's a model for this. Swansea City is way ahead of us on this. They've had a partnership established for many years. The council is part of that, along with charitable and other partners who fundraise and plan the right locations to put these things. This has been in the hands of volunteers like Simon, who spoke this afternoon, for a long time, and they've done brilliant work. But it's time for us to come in behind them now. Wouldn't it be brilliant if in a couple of years' time there were people alive and well walking around our city because we made this commitment today? So please, let's support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'd now like to ask Councillor Graham Morris of the Conservative Group to second the motion.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I rise to support this excellent silver motion. Someone who saw his father collapse and had CPR, unfortunately it wasn't successful. You know, it was clear there was no defibrillator there. It may have made a difference. But I like this motion because we have an opportunity to achieve something that could benefit many people across this city. We hope that we would never need to access a defibrillator, but sadly, as we have heard today, cardiac arrest can strike anyone at any time and in any place. I'm sure many of us remember the footballers Christian Eriksen and Fabrice Muamba. They survived because defibrillators were available and they were there quickly. This city already has hundreds, if not thousands, of defibrillators. They might lie in offices, clubs or shops. And I think the issue is threefold. We don't know where they are. The ambulance service don't know where they are. We need to ensure that the defibrillators are where we need them to be. And most importantly, they need to be accessible. And by accessible, they need to be in the right locations and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this motion calls on the City to respond to this challenge. For the Council and all of us members to work with City partners to challenge and encourage them to support the communities that we serve and they serve by providing publicly accessible defibrillators. But we also need to ensure that all parts of the city get the same access and consideration for defibrillators. In some ways, this motion doesn't really go far enough. I would like to see every trading estate, retail park have a 24/7 defib. We need to plan our housing developments to have a defib included. And what practical steps can we take? Do we know how many defibs there are in our wards? Are they publicly accessible? Do you know where they are? Do you know how to access them? How to use them? As Chair of Health Scrutiny, I would welcome the chance to work with officers to bring this onto our work programme next year to see how we can take this forward, maybe through public health. If the work that hopefully will start here today can stop another family going through the pain and trauma of the Pelledri family, then surely we have achieved something positive. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to hear from the speakers on the motion, and the first speaker I'd like to call is Councillor Ellie King to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you. I thank Councillor Smith for bringing this motion to full council. The Labour Group is of course happy to support this motion. I want to pay tribute to Sam Pelledri, who tragically passed away following a heart attack in a gym on Millennium Square. I would also like to pay tribute to his family, his mother who spoke powerfully today, who have been leading a campaign to ensure this tragedy won't be repeated. We now have a defibrillator installed in Millennium Square, but we'll work to install them more widely. Around 140,000 people die from cardiac arrests each year in the UK. Anything we can do to bring that number down is a worthwhile endeavour. As members learnt this morning at the CPR and defib training session for councillors run by Great Western Air Ambulance Charity, the survival rate for cardiac arrest drops by 7 to 10% for every minute someone has to wait for defibrillation. This highlights the importance of having a wide array of accessible defibrillators across the city. The motion states that charitable partners can fundraise for defibrillators. The council will of course work with these partners to fund and install defibrillators. And I know just this morning, Councillor Jackson received confirmation that one will be installed in Philwood Community Centre, funded by charities. Community infrastructure levy can also be used to fund them, so that where there are locations across the city that are a particularly high priority for a defibrillator, I encourage members to liaise with organisations like the Great Western Ambulance Charity and the Heartbeat Trust to put in SIL bids for these when the next round opens. They only cost around £2,500 to install, which would be money well spent if it could save a life. We also need to talk about how we maintain them. That's a separate conversation, though. I'm sure we can get around that. I'd be happy to work cross-party and with city partners to roll out CPR and first aid training more widely. And I thank Councillor Smith for organising the CPR and defibrillation training for us earlier today. I think it was really well attended, and I think all members would agree that it is reassuring and well worth taking the time to undertake this potentially life-saving training so that we can confidently know how to respond to a cardiac arrest emergency. I also take on board the points that were made about public accessibility. It's really important, and awareness of locations. A map of the city, it's quite hard to find where they are in the city. So there are points well made and conversations that I'd be keen to continue. The motion refers specifically to taxi drivers and the education sector, which is certainly a good place to start, but I think we can and should go much wider than that. And I look forward to working with city partners to further expand CPR, first aid and defibrillator training across Bristol. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd now like to call on Councillor Lorraine Francis to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I stand in support of this motion for a variety of reasons. There have been defibs, AEDs, around Bristol for quite a while now. But as with most great ideas, it often takes a tragedy and a family's grief to bring the issue to the forefront. The Pelledri family, through their grief, have been instrumental in making us think about the positioning of these potentially life-saving devices to make sure that they are accessible and visible to all. One of the reasons why I wanted to stand in support of this motion has been because I have been actively involved in trying to roll out first aid training for quite some time prior to 2021. My motivation for doing this goes back many decades, relating to numerous unnecessary deaths which has occurred locally, internationally, and within my own family relating to knife crimes. But that is a different story. However, research does say that a knife attack can lead to an heart attack, hence my reference to it. But my focus on AEDs was and remains directly linked to Sam Pelledri's sad passing. I support the principles incorporated within Councillor Smith's motion, but my hands-on approach to change meant that I am about to launch a GoFund page with Great Western Ambulance Service, where we have already received a positive donation from Avon and Somerset Police community team, so we are nearly halfway through that fundraising scheme already. Together with a local pub in my ward, the Star Pub, we will be raising, providing training to ensure that community members are able to understand what to do and to be effective in supporting the AEDs. Great Western Ambulance Service and I have already also provided training to a group of women locally who have all embraced the experience and commented upon their gratitude for having the chance to engage. The plan is to continue that work with groups to ensure that we reach as diverse communities as possible in a positive and practical way, to ensure that if a critical situation was to arise, a passerby could be able to render vital assistance. Let's get defibs across the city to ensure that one is accessible within a 3-minute walk. The new AED in my ward will be located on the Star Pub, and Mr. and Mrs. Pelledri's agreement will be to dedicate that defib to the memory of their much-loved son, Sam Pelledri. I warm-heartedly thank them for agreeing to do this. Thank you, Councillor Smith, for bringing this motion. The Greens will be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, excuse me, can I call on Councillor Classic to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I first want to pay tribute to Sam Pelledri and thank his mother Louise for coming today and speaking in public forum. It is said that for every minute someone is in cardiac arrest without help, their chance of survival or making a full recovery drops by 10%. This means that during the course of my 3-minute speech, someone's chance of surviving or making a full recovery will drop by 30%. In the time it takes for all of us to speak towards this motion, that chance drops below 0. Those are quite shocking. Around 60,000 people a year in the UK will suffer an out-of-hospital sudden cardiac arrest. Unfortunately, the current figures show that around only 1 in 10 will survive. 2 key factors that could significantly increase these odds are administration of CPR and the use of a defibrillator. If a defib is used within the time of my speech, the survival rate will jump to 74%. Out-of-hospital defibrillators will only be used in around 3% of cases, though, and CPR is only given in around 30 to 40% of the time, mainly due to ordinary bystanders not having the knowledge or confidence to administer it. We really need, as a city, to improve those odds for our residents. Increasing the amount of publicly available defibrillators is essential to this aim, and also training the public on administering help when needed. This motion is a great start to these aims, and I hope that passing it will make a significant difference to the lives of people in the city, and in the case of the worst happening. We will be supporting this motion. And I just want to make a plea to my colleagues across the chamber. Obviously this morning some of us attended some great training by Great Western Air Ambulance, and it was really fantastic. So I will say, if you have the opportunity and you haven't already done it, please do take the training for knowledge, for confidence, for knowing how to act within that situation, because if you are there, any minute that passes just help somebody's survival rate. The earlier that the CPR is started, and it was fairly easy training. It was simple, easy to follow, and just having that knowledge. So you never know when that skill may be necessary, and it could be the reason that somebody survives a cardiac arrest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. Finally, I'd like to call on Councillor Gary Hopkins to speak on behalf of the Knoll Community Party.
Right. Firstly, thank you for bringing the motion. Very well put together, very well explained. Can we just all get along and support this, please, so that we actually achieve something that the public will actually notice that we're doing something sensible. There's no argument against it, and it's simple to actually put into practice. So let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Marvin, do you wish to respond to the motion? Thank you. Okay. Councillor Smith, would you like to respond now as mover to the motion? Final comments?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Just very briefly, just to thank everybody for their support. Clearly, this is going to pass. I do want to say, though, that passing a motion doesn't make any difference. Now we have to act on it. And I'm really encouraged by all of the ideas and the thoughts and the actions that people are already taking around the chamber. So let's take this as a starting point and let's make it happen. But it's nice to finish our year for Christmas with a bit of consensus. Happy Christmas, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so we move to the vote. It'll be another e-vote. Please ensure you're in your proper seats. The voting will be open for 15 seconds. And when I get the nod, yeah, you may vote now. Okay, so that seems to be unanimously passed. Thank you all very much. So it only remains for me to say thank you all for being in the chamber today. I think Councillor Mack wants to make one small announcement. Oh, you want me to do it? Yes, just a reminder from Councillor Mack that we are signing Christmas cards next door in the conference room to foster families, foster carers. So if anybody can spend a few minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, signing some cards, that would be very much appreciated.
And they're going to be set up from about 5:30, so earlier than the calendar invite. So
Okay.
they could be straight after this meeting, so whenever you can come in.
So all it remains for me to say is that the next meeting of the full council will be on Tuesday, the 10th of January, which will be a brand new year, by which time we will all have had a fantastic Christmas and a very happy new year. And I wish you all the very best. Take care. Thank you.